With the new Fantastic Four movie lighting up theaters, we've got one question for you. Are you ready to dive headfirst into the story that changed everything? Welcome to Marvelous Long Reads, where today we're cracking open a run so bold, so heartbreaking, and so mind-blowingly epic, it redefines what it means to be Marvel's first family. Cosmic disasters? Check. Multiversal conspiracies? You bet. Royal betrayals beneath the ocean, and a last stand in the heart of the negative zone. Oh yeah, it's all here. Reed, Sue, Johnny, Ben, Val, and Franklin face impossible choices, devastating losses, and the spark of something new, the road to the future foundation. Whether you're a lifelong fan or just stepping in from the big screen, this is the adventure that will pull you deep into the heart of Marvel's legacy. So suit up, and remember, this isn't just a Fantastic Four story, it's the one that will stretch your imagination to the edge of the universe. But before we begin, we have a small request. If you like our content, please subscribe to our channel. It is a small click from you, but it means a lot to us. Thank you. Dark Reign, The Bridge. Chapter 1. Reed Richards worked tirelessly inside the Baxter Building alongside his robot assistants, focused on repairing and building a high-tech machine. It was a week after the Skrull invasion, and he was visibly obsessed with his work. As narration overlaid his actions, Reed reflected on how everything began 3 days after Norman Osborn took control, the moment he returned to the Baxter Building. He called it a moment of truth, a realization that he was responsible for everything, and his actions had caused pain to his family and humanity. Meanwhile, Franklin and Valeria Richards rode home in a car with Alicia Masters. Franklin, dressed in cowboy gear, excitedly said they were almost home, while Valeria sulked. She complained about the constant destruction of her belongings. Franklin defended his outfit, calling their recent experiences, including the Skrull attack and getting trapped in the negative zone, like the Wild West. Alicia gently told Franklin that while she believed kids could be whatever they wanted, playing with toy guns might send the wrong message. Elsewhere in the Baxter Building, Johnny Storm and Ben Grimm relaxed as robots helped reorganize the space. Johnny questioned his identity, wondering if he was still himself without the spotlight and fame. Ben offered supportive banter, but Johnny admitted he feared he may never be the same again. He felt like a man without a mission. Ben, trying to cheer him up, reminded him they were getting cool new gear. Sue Storm entered, annoyed they weren't helping finish the setup. Ben and Johnny pointed out the Doombots were handling it better than they could. Sue insisted the house should be ready before the kids got home. Johnny countered that she'd sent them out hours ago and they had a lot to move. Just as Ben tried to respond, he noticed all the robots, his thingamajigs, were leaving towards another place in the building. Reed Richards' internal narration unfolded as a Doombot rolled through the halls of the Baxter Building. He reflected that one cannot lie to themselves, and guilt has a way of clouding judgment. It narrows vision, he thought. The only thing that matters when assessing a situation is facts. One must set everything else aside. Reed continued, saying that doing so allows inspiration to strike, creating a moment when conflict meets resolution and the path forward becomes clear. As the Doombot entered a chamber filled with other bots, Ben, Sue, and Johnny followed. Ben muttered, "I should have known." Johnny asked, "You too?" Sue added, "It always begins the same way." They found Reed working on a machine. Sue shouted his name. Reed admitted he got distracted and apologized, saying he had the best intentions. He had planned to finish home security, convert Herbies into a hoverhorse for Franklin, and tackle 27 more tasks. But he had an idea. He built a 2-point singularity power source for an uncertainty engine and created a variable image to interpret alternate realities. Johnny groaned at the science talk, and Reed joked about his grades. Lying on the floor with the others, Reed explained the machine. It was an observation device to see how other Earths solved problems like theirs. When asked if it was small, he said, "Big plans, Ben. Big machine." He called it the Bridge. Outside, Hammer troops mobilized under Norman Osborn's directive. Civilians fled as armored vehicles surrounded the Baxter Building. Inside the command truck, a leader explained the Fantastic Four were suspended and the base was being shut down. Resistance was expected, so they armed up and prepared to engage. Inside, Reed prepared to use the bridge. Sue questioned the timing. Reed insisted this had to be done. He had made choices that cost lives and fractured their family. Now, he needed to find out where it all went wrong. Reed stood before the bridge and asked the team to wish him luck. Sue, worried, admitted she didn't like how it felt. Reed assured her that technically he wouldn't be going anywhere. Reality would shift around him, making it appear as though he disappeared, but he'd still be in the same spot. Sue softly responded, "That's not what I meant." Reed promised, "I will always come home," before stepping into the glowing portal. The moment he vanished, Hammer agents smashed through a window and stormed the building. From the control room, a staff member surrendered with her hands up as red laser sights locked on her. Down below, Sue, Ben, and Johnny witnessed the breach and identified the intruders as Osborne's men. Sue realized the kids were about to return any second and told the team to prepare. She wanted the fight done 2 minutes after they hit the lobby. Outside, Franklin ran toward the building while thanking Alicia. Inside, Hammer agents began cutting power to the generators. As Reed stepped deeper into the bridge's shimmering field, he noticed something strange. At that moment, Franklin and Valeria spotted the glow from the outside, and both looked in awe. Valeria called out, "Dad!" Energy surged around the Baxter Building, then went dark. Inside, Sue, Ben, and Johnny were left in the dark until Sue anticipated emergency lights to kick in. When they didn't, they braced themselves. Johnny flared up angrily, but Ben reminded him to tone it down in the confined space. Sue figured they were on the 5th floor and instructed Ben to bust them out, Johnny to head downstairs, and the rest to follow close behind. As Ben broke open the elevator door, they emerged into a surreal alternate world, a prehistoric jungle filled with dinosaurs, deviants, Eternals, celestial giants, the Silver Surfer, and Skrulls. Ben stared in disbelief and muttered, "Oh, crap." Back inside the bridge, Reed's narration resumed. He recounted everything: civil war, the Illuminati, secret invasion, and acknowledged his guilt. He confirmed the bridge was functioning and vowed to see how to make things right. "There's no problem that can't be solved," he said. Chapter 2. Franklin stood confidently with 2 toy guns aimed, warning the intruders, "Move and I shoot." The Hammer agents were caught off guard by the standoff. One agent, amused, remarked on the kids, asking if these were the Richards children. Another confirmed, Franklin and Valeria. When asked where their parents were, Franklin snapped, "None of your business," while Valeria whispered that he didn't know anyway. Franklin insisted he was serious and trying to scare them off. Valeria sarcastically encouraged him to say something tough. Franklin stepped up to them and declared this was the home of the most awesome superheroes in the world, and that the agents should turn around and leave. If they didn't, he warned, Valeria would get to watch him kick butt. Valeria added, "Ooh, you're gonna be in trouble." The agents had enough. One ordered they be taken into custody until they figured out what to do with them. Valeria suddenly pulled out a strange device and yelled, "Oh no, you won't." The agents were startled. One calmed the situation, saying they were just following orders to shut the team down and serve a notice. Franklin took the notice and dismissed them with a sarcastic, "Have a nice day, officer." After the agents left, Franklin asked if Valeria's device actually worked. She said it could probably contact the International Space Station. Franklin expressed concern that their parents, or at least Uncle Johnny, should have returned by now, and hoped they were all right. Valeria reassured him. Meanwhile, in the alternate reality of collapsed time, the team fought off monsters, celestials, and dinosaurs. Back in the real world, Franklin and Valeria walked through the dim Baxter Building. Valeria believed their dad would figure things out, but said she had an idea to help. She explained that although Reed planned for many scenarios, he likely didn't count on surprise guests. Franklin realized the bad guys had cut the power. If they fixed it, he believed things would return to normal. Valeria, working on wires, replied, "Define normal, Franklin." Reed Richards instructed a computer to begin scanning using pre-selected parameters. He thought the first step to finding a solution was to understand the failure he was trying to correct. To do that, he analyzed events from the past year to determine whether they were caused by or occurred despite his actions. He believed that comparing data from his universe with similar events from alternate realities could offer insight. The machine he built allowed him to look into other outcomes and compare his present with theirs. He pinpointed where he believed things went wrong: the implementation of the Superhuman Registration Act, which led to civil war. As he observed the conflict, Franklin and Valeria discussed whether to restore power. Valeria feared it might make things worse, while Franklin hesitated to act out of fear of getting in trouble. Valeria expressed frustration about making such a heavy decision, and Franklin reminded her that superheroes face such burdens every day. Reed quietly activated the visualizer. In variable space-time, the Fantastic Four were locked in battle with alien creatures in a forest while reality around them began to compress. As the battle faded into a white void, the machine concluded its scan. It identified over 12 million realities that enacted superhero registration. population. Of those, around 3 million led to conflict among metahumans, and only 418 had peaceful resolutions. Reed requested those 418 outcomes to be uploaded directly into his brain. Once connected, he reviewed a reality labeled Earth 155, where Reed Richards and Hank Pym initiated the registration. Pym died of an aneurysm 2 days later, but Richards successfully persuaded others of the law's necessity and importance. Only one major clash took place. Reed observed that Tony Stark's lack of involvement in this reality might have helped avoid extended conflict. Meanwhile, in collapsed space-time reality, Queen Sue worried about a rebellion that threatened to tear her kingdom apart. Though determined to resist, she was vexed by the peasants demanding equality. She ranted about her divine right and law-given authority. Captain America, dressed as a knight, knelt before her. He warned her about a man among the people, a deceiver with a silver tongue, who told the people what they wanted to hear. The Human Torch, also in armor, asked what that was. Outside the castle, Iron Man addressed a gathering. He claimed they were all born free and equal, and no one was better than anyone else. He called for a code that would govern everyone fairly. When She-Hulk asked how they would achieve that, he answered with dialogue and education. However, if that failed, war would be the next step. He said he would bleed for a new righteous society and rallied the heroes to shout, "Republic!" The Queen, enraged by the growing rebellion, questioned the people's ingratitude. She demanded to know who protected them from other realms and why they now challenged her. Captain America offered to discipline the rebels, and she granted him permission. She added that the offenders should receive this correction directly from her. When she asked Chamberlain Grimm for his opinion, he simply replied, "It's clobbering hour." Reed continued analyzing realities. One reality saw peace due to a romantic bond between Steve Rogers and Natasha Stark, keeping each other's aggression in check and letting Reed implement the Registration Act successfully. In another, a serum granting superpowers to anyone helped unite the population. One version of Reed stripped everyone of their powers, making conflict obsolete. In another world, Tony Stark's absence and Captain America's late return allowed a peaceful rollout of the initiative. Across all 418 peaceful outcomes, Reed identified one constant. Reed Richards realized he had acted alone, without Hank Pym, Tony Stark, or anyone else interfering with his ideas. There were no conflicting opinions or compromises. He wondered if that simplicity was the key and rushed back to the machine, determined to find out more. The visualizer engaged again. In collapsed space-time, a chaotic battle ensued between Queen Sue and the other rebels. Suddenly, the space-time around them collapsed and began compressing into white light. A new reality was formed. Aboard a colonial-era ship, a pirate ordered his men to prepare for battle and spill colonial blood. Chamberlain Grimm was present there too. He admitted that nothing about the situation felt right. Confused, pleaded for someone to explain what was going on. Pirate Johnny and Wench Sue stood beside him, ready for a fight. There was another version of him, Pirate Ben, standing right there. The group appeared completely out of place, caught in a surreal and historical setting. The conflict loomed as they braced for the unknown. Chapter 3. In collapsed space-time, 2 airborne ships exchanged cannon fire as a battle unfolded above the clouds. Pirate Johnny called the attackers devils from another land and vowed to stop them. He promised a drink with the Wench Sue once his task was done. Skrull invaders boarded the ship, and Chamberlain Grimm struggled to understand how he had shifted between times and places. He sarcastically lamented being surrounded by criminals, but Pirate Ben told him to stop talking and start fighting. He obliged and joined the brawl. Sue Storm reported to the High Council via communication device, updating them that enemy harassment continued. Resistance was strong, but they held firm. The Council, including Iron Man and others, commended her and encouraged her to continue. One member complimented her disguise, to which she joked about losing a tooth to scurvy. Meanwhile, at the bridge, Reed Richards analyzed 67 realities that had experienced both a superhero civil war and the formation of the Illuminati. He found only those had achieved peace. In Earth 976, Reed convinced Tony Stark to form a group, including the most powerful minds, Doom, Magneto, Black Bolt, and others, to act in unified global interest. It was seen as a solidified front that brought order. In Earth 5521, the Illuminati released the Phoenix Force on the Skrull homeworld. Soon after, Reed was forced to destroy the Phoenix host to prevent a Shi'ar invasion. Although it stopped future hostilities, the outcome was ethically disturbing. In Earth 231, Reed Reed, foreseeing catastrophe, eliminated the Illuminati at the moment of their formation. Surrounded by their decaying corpses, he judged their ambitions would have doomed the world. Reflecting on these outcomes, the main Reed Richards concluded that their failures stemmed from arrogance and a refusal to recognize the consequences of their decisions. He began to grasp the weight and direction of his efforts. In the Baxter Building, Franklin asked Val if it was safe. She confirmed everything was shut down except their floor, and they'd managed to find hot dogs and beans. As they ate, they joked, beans and Franklins, but then grew serious. Franklin asked what they would do if their parents didn't return by tomorrow. Val reminded him that Norman Osborn might come to take them, like he did with other heroes' kids. Franklin firmly said that wouldn't happen. When Val asked what they'd do, Franklin picked up a toy revolver and promised he wouldn't let it happen. In a Wild West town within collapsed space-time, the Fantastic Four sat in a quiet saloon. Pirate Johnny complained about the lack of women. A local warned him to watch his words. Ben questioned why things were so quiet. The man told them it was because something big was about to go down. Black Susan, the sheriff and Sue Storm of this reality, stood firm in the street. She had made the town clean and law-abiding. But a mysterious man in white had arrived, wanting to change things. No one knew where he came from. He believed in new ideas, but Susan didn't. They were at a standoff. Meanwhile, Reed continued analyzing worlds. On Earth 538, the Beyonder remade the world so he could be worshipped. On Earth 29007, peace came when heroes and villains were taken to a recreated battle world. On Earth 2817, the Beyonder incinerated the world in rage and restarted it with a single man and woman. As the clock approached noon, Black Susan and the man in white locked eyes. Time ticked closer. At the final stroke, Susan fired her gun, shooting him down without hesitation. Elsewhere, Reed quietly watched, then activated another command on his machine, still seeking deeper answers. Reed Richards expanded his multiversal search to include timelines up to the Skrull invasion. Out of all realities, only one world, Earth 3290, had achieved peace through total surrender. In that world, the heroes had fully capitulated to the Skrulls. They stood broken under their control as Skrulls loomed over them. Reed reflected that the Illuminati's existence rarely led to peaceful resolutions. Their ambition had fueled the Skrull War, but perhaps somewhere in those infinite outcomes was an answer, where intentions met reality. In a warped timeline, Johnny and Chamberlain Grimm were aboard a World War II bomber. Johnny praised Ben's skills as a captain, but Ben admitted he couldn't fly the machine. Outside, a fleet of bombers flew in formation. Inside, soldiers gathered as a commander delivered a speech about American resolve and the enemy overreaching its limits. The commander ordered them to jump and repel the invaders. All different versions of Ben, Johnny, and Sue leapt into the sky. The commander then told Johnny and Ben that the ship was lost. With only one parachute left, Johnny jumped and Ben followed, accepting the situation with a calm, "Oh well." Explosions tore through the air as a colossal alien ship engaged the bomber fleet. The thing fell helplessly amid the fire and debris, mouth open in a silent scream. Meanwhile, Franklin and Valeria slept on the floor surrounded by scattered items. At 8 a.m, the alarm went off. Franklin stirred awake, sat up and rubbed his eyes. He got up to check the screen and see what was happening. What he saw alarmed him. He ran back and shouted for Valeria to wake up. On the screen, Norman Osborn and a Hammer battalion, with Venom walking beside him, were advancing through the streets. Franklin, dressed in his cowboy outfit and holding toy revolvers, shouted, "Norman Osborn is a-comin', and hell's comin' with him!" Chapter 4. At the Baxter Building, Norman Osborn, Venom, and Hammer soldiers prepared to enter. Franklin and Valeria watched from inside. Valeria noted their parents still hadn't returned, meaning they had to handle things themselves. Franklin reassured her, saying he had an idea. When asked what it was, he grinned and said he was going to totally mess with Osborn's head. Outside, Norman stared at the building's entrance and pressed the buzzer. Inside, Franklin answered with a snarky, "We didn't order any pizza." Norman, trying to keep composed, replied that he was there to see Reed Richards and that he was expected. Meanwhile, Reed was connected to the bridge, a machine downloading countless alternate Earth outcomes into his brain. He gasped from the mental strain. Eventually, he tore off the device and screamed in pain. He declared that despite expanding parameters and absorbing over 1 billion possible Earths, every outcome still led to unacceptable results. Nothing could have prevented what had happened. Norman and his group stepped into the building, demanding to see Reed. Valeria met them and coolly said she couldn't take both Norman and Venom. When Norman questioned her, she showed him the legal notice they had been served, stating that only one representative was allowed. Norman didn't appreciate her tone, but she held her ground, pointing to the clause that used the word singular. She reminded him that he wrote the rules and should follow them. Venom snarled at her, baring his fangs and roaring. Valeria casually responded, "So gross." Norman calmed Venom down, admitting the girl had a point. He told Venom, Mac Gargan, to stay behind, promising to let him eat the lawyer who drafted the document later. Norman then walked with Valeria, leaving the symbiote fuming. Valeria walked with Norman Osborn and calmly told him that he wouldn't be meeting with her father. Norman, confused, asked what she meant. She explained that her parents were busy saving the world and didn't have time to deal with someone like him. Instead, she pointed toward Franklin. Franklin appeared wearing a Spider-Man mask, cowboy hat and bandoliers, mocking Norman's appearance by calling him a loser. In another universe where space-time had collapsed, a giant face inside a tank broadcasted a warning. Sanctuary had been breached and their galaxy had been overtaken by evil. It urged the defenders to prepare for what was coming. Sue Richards begged the Supreme Intelligence for guidance, asking for a plan. Suddenly, monstrous venom-like creatures began attacking. One of the Johnnies declared there was no plan and they were totally doomed. Chaos erupted as the creatures overwhelmed the room. One Johnny fired back, demanding answers, but all he got was a grim reflection. They had failed to confront the threat, compromised their values, and tolerated decay. Instead of destroying the corruption, they tried to understand it. Now it was too late. The infection had spread too far. Black Susan raised her guns and rallied everyone to fight. Ben and Johnny joined in, ready to stand their ground. But the Supreme Intelligence announced their failures were beyond redemption and initiated a self-destruct countdown. The symbiote horde surged forward. Ben warned that they were coming, and they admitted this was the end. Sue disagreed and declared it's never over. Meanwhile, Reed stood at the bridge, repeating to himself that there was always a way. He realized that the answer wasn't in endless simulations, but in one single moment of pure, honest clarity. He reflected on how all collective efforts had failed, while the successful outcomes came only when he acted alone. He questioned whether this was arrogance or a sense of responsibility, and asked himself which was the truth. The battle raged violently as the symbiote horde clashed with the defenders. Cowgirl Sue, Johnny, Ben, and the alternate Fantastic Four members fought side by side. Amid the chaos, Chamberlain Grimm, now armored, smashed into the enemy with brutal force. Explosions lit the battlefield, while Reed's voice echoed in thought. He believed the truth was that among all space and time, there was one person who could have prevented everything: himself. He admitted to hiding behind false humility and avoiding responsibility. He recognized that he was the only one capable of solving the difficult problems. For too long, he had ignored that truth. Now, as the others fought and bled, Reed accepted that his brilliance was a gift meant to be used. He had failed everyone by not acting when it mattered most. Determined, Reed resolved to fix it. He ordered the computer to begin powering down the bridge and turned off the visualizer. With resolve in his eyes, he pressed the shutdown button. The real versions of Sue, Ben, and Johnny regained consciousness on the floor of the Baxter Building. Sue muttered that they were back. Ben helped her up, and Johnny supported her as they prepared to move forward. When the elevator opened, Reed stood there. Sue rushed into his arms, calling his name. Reed embraced her and softly said, "Hey there." Ben greeted Reed with a grin, teasing him for taking so long. Reed asked where the kids were. Back at the Baxter Building, Franklin and Valeria sprinted through the hallway with Norman Osborn chasing them. Valeria scolded Franklin for messing with Osborn's head. Bullets flew past as they ducked and dodged. Valeria pointed to a room, telling Franklin to get inside. Franklin dove over a desk, and the two children took cover just as gunfire erupted behind them. Franklin and Valeria hid behind a desk as Norman Osborn approached, pistol in hand. Franklin signaled for silence. Norman stepped in, mocking the children and stating his belief in corporal punishment, calling disrespect a serious offense. He aimed his gun and warned that it would hurt them more than him. Valeria nervously whispered Franklin's name, but Franklin told her to stay behind him, promising to protect her. Just as Norman prepared to act, a voice called out his name. He turned, startled, as Sue, Johnny, Ben, and Reed stormed in. Sue shouted furiously, "Get away from my children!" as Johnny flew in a blaze. Chapter 5. At the Baxter Building, Reed Richards looked tense as the Human Torch flared up. Sue Storm stood protectively in front of the children, shielding them. Ben Grimm narrowed his eyes in anger. Sue commanded, "Get away from the children, Osborn." Norman Osborn, aiming a gun, coldly replied, "Make me." Sue, standing with Ben beside her, said, "With pleasure." She unleashed her powers, slamming Osborn into a wall. Another agent aimed his weapon, but Sue knocked him back with a force blast. As he recovered, he warned her that she'd regret it, calling what he did next a dog whistle. He activated a device, summoning Venom and a squad of armed agents, which he ominously called the Wild Hunt. Reed ordered Sue to close off the room. She obeyed, erecting a force field, pushing one of the agents away. The shockwave hit Venom, who recoiled in pain. The force field sealed the area, separating them from the outside. Inside, the Fantastic Four, Human Torch, Thing, and Invisible Woman, stood ready against Osborn and his squad. Osborn admitted he was at a disadvantage. He then told his men to wait outside, trusting Reed wouldn't release him unless it was safe. Reed demanded Osborn stay out of their home for good. Osborn didn't deny anything, but said the truth didn't matter anymore. Though he was leaving, he taunted Reed about his helpless situation. Osborn claimed he was now the government and the final authority, and he would eventually win. Suddenly, Osborn pulled a hidden gun. Sue screamed, "Reed!" as Osborn pointed it at Reed and fired. The page ended with a loud blam as Reed flinched, and everyone reacted in shock. Osborn was shocked to realize he had been shot in the shoulder. Everyone turned, stunned, and saw Franklin Richards holding a toy gun that had somehow fired. Sue gasped in horror, and Franklin, wearing a cowboy hat, declared, "Mister, I'm the law around these parts." Sue scolded Franklin, saying it didn't matter whether he thought it was right, he shouldn't hurt others. Franklin apologized, and Johnny took the toy gun from him. Sue warned that sorry might not be enough. Meanwhile, Osborn, clutching his wound, threatened Reed, but Reed stood firm, stating, "I won't let you." Osborn raged, promising he'd return in the night, and Reed wouldn't stop him. Reed repeated, "I will," and gave Osborn one last chance to leave on his own. Reed told Franklin they would talk about what happened later. Ben hugged Johnny in relief. Franklin insisted he didn't understand, it was just a toy gun. Sue asked if the kids were okay. Valeria confirmed they were. She and Franklin excitedly recounted their adventures. Franklin acted like Spider-Man. Val scared off Hammer agents, and they both stayed up all night, though Val said Franklin fell asleep. Reed told them they would have a talk later, especially he and Franklin. Val agreed, and Reed admitted he thought he found what he needed. Ben said they'd been through the ringer. Sue asked Reed to explain what happened to him. Reed said the experiment worked. He had seen everything. He believed he could fix things now, fix the M for good. Sue asked if everything was all right, or if something else had happened. Reed didn't respond, only saying, "What?" He was unmindful and thinking about what had happened earlier. A while ago, Reed stood at the bridge. He ordered the computer to power it down and switch off the visualizer. Before it shut down, he requested one last projection. How many other bridges like his existed? The computer processed, then responded, 141. Reed looked stunned and whispered, "Oh!" Reed stared into the glowing portal of the bridge as shadowy figures emerged, versions of himself from alternate realities. Later, Sue again asked him if something else had happened. Reed hesitated, then lied, saying no, nothing. Sue told him if that was true, she wanted him to destroy the bridge. Startled, Reed asked, "What?" Sue firmly insisted. She said she never made such demands, but this time he had endangered them all. She asked him to return to the lab and destroy the device. Reed hesitated, then promised. Reed entered the lab and began dismantling the bridge. He recalled Sue's words, piece by piece. Then he remembered the figures from the portal offering help. One of them guessed Reed wanted to fix things and said they could help. Reed asked who they were. The figures said they were just like him and they'd be waiting when he was ready, but warned not to delay as things could get worse. Reed acknowledged that. He flipped the power switch, saying he told Sue he'd take it apart piece by piece, and he did. Later, Reed sat silently in front of the now dismantled bridge. He explained that he eventually put it back together. He had to. It had been 2 weeks since the Skrull invasion. After Norman Osborn took control of the Cabal, Reed returned to the bridge. That was the day he committed himself to crossing the threshold. He called it a moment of clarity, of truth, knowing what needed to be done, regardless of the cost. He finally understood a single fact. He had caused all of it. Reed entered a dark room filled with equations and blueprints, reflecting on how his actions caused suffering to humanity and his family. He resolved to make things right. His eyes settled on a wall marked Idea number 101. Solve everything, affirming to himself that no problem existed that couldn't be solved. solve everything. Chapter 1. A young Reed Richards stood nervously on the edge of a wooden platform, unsure about jumping. His father calmly encouraged him, assuring him he'd catch him. Reed hesitated, saying he didn't want to do it, and suggested they try something else. His father gently insisted, telling Reed to look at him and reminded him that while it was okay to be afraid or to fail, not even trying was unacceptable. Motivated, Reed adjusted his cap, declared he was ready, and jumped. In the present, the Fantastic Four were in the middle of a fierce battle as a massive robot burst through a wall. The thing tackled it. The Human Torch ignited into flame, and Sue Storm held up a force field. The robot declared itself an instrument of fate, designed for a singular purpose, righteous vengeance in robotic form. As it attacked, it took Johnny out of commission and entangled Reed with metallic coils. Sue struggled to hold the team together and called out to Reed for help. Reed, analyzing the situation despite being restrained, deduced that each robot, these hunter-killers, had been specifically engineered to defeat a particular member of the team. As one robot claimed, "I cannot fail," Ben responded by smashing its head in and shouted that they needed to change tactics. They discovered a man inside the downed hunter-killer, Bentley Whitman, the wizard. Ben noted the man had no clothes, and Johnny identified him immediately. Reed instructed the team to check the other machines. Johnny scanned them with thermal vision and confirmed the other pilots were still alive. Reed advised caution and compassion, reminding them these were people. Meanwhile, at the wizard's lair in Manhattan, Bentley brooded over his creation's failures, lamenting how his sons disappointed him. He admitted he felt only anger and resolved to take action. The thing delivered the last defeated clone, confirming to the team they were all the same person. Sue guessed they were manufactured clones. Reed examined them, but couldn't tell which, if any, was the original. Something seemed off, so Reed investigated further. On closer inspection, he discovered one clone had a head that was grotesquely distorted. He then scanned the body and found advanced components embedded in it. Reed uncovered a bomb powered by a plutonium brain, calling it the clone's final solution. Sue noted these were hunter-killer clones meant to be terminated, but Reed stressed this was an even bigger problem. The bomb was active. Reed said he could track it, but only had one translocator with him. He assured Sue it wouldn't take long and promised to be back for dinner. Sue called out to Reed as he teleported away. Reed reappeared in a hidden lab and discovered a room filled with cloned babies in stasis tubes. He asked in shock, "What have you done?" Bentley, the clone creator, responded from the shadows, calling this discovery not evil. He suggested slicing atoms to find the origin of the universe. Reed told him to stop. Reed found a child curled in the corner and told Bentley he wasn't well. Bentley, visibly decaying, claimed gods make mistakes and insisted things needed to be burned down and rebuilt. He sarcastically suggested publishing a paper with Reed. Reed wrapped him in restraining tech, assuring him he'd get good care once arrested. He promised to visit. The boy silently watched. Later at the Baxter Building, Reed told the story to Franklin and Valeria in bed. After story time, Franklin asked about the little boy from the story. Reed explained the boy would be found a home and looked after. As Franklin drifted to sleep, he asked Reed to try to help the boy. Reed quietly agreed. Johnny offered Ben 3 envelopes, each containing a prepaid vacation to a secluded location. He jokingly called it a game show and urged Ben to pick one, saying he was lonely and heartbroken and needed to get away. Ben hesitated, but eventually picked one. Sue confirmed the kids were asleep, and Reed thanked her. Reed and Sue shared a quiet moment, with Reed noting Val figured out the building modifications and praising her intelligence. Johnny announced the winner was a trip to New World with celebrity Johnny Storm. He also added a humorous prize, fruit basket and bath products, commending Ben for the idea. Johnny teased Ben about finding a girl there, and Ben grumbled he should have picked another envelope. Sue admitted feeling unsure how to handle things lately, but Reed assured her she was doing great. Johnny said all the envelopes had the same thing anyway. As Sue headed to bed, Reed declined, saying he had thoughts to work through. A haunting vision of Dr. Doom appeared in Reed's mind, saying math is divine, and they had both calculated the world would tear itself apart. Reed whispered, "We've been judged." Sue kissed Reed goodnight, telling him not to fall asleep in the lab. Reed headed down into a secure chamber. A voice confirmed his authorization, and Reed responded, "There is always hope." He entered a sealed chamber labeled Deep in Thought, Keep Out, filled with scientific equations and theories. Reed narrated how he once built a powerful machine that answered impossible questions. Finding it too dangerous, he dismantled and hid it among 100 ideas he believed could change change the world. At the center was idea number 101, solve everything. And beyond that was something greater. Reed activated a large portal device and entered, asking 3 mysterious figures for help. They welcomed him. Reed asked, "How do I solve everything?" One of the figures clarified they weren't him, but other versions, Dr. Richards from different Earths. They had powers similar to Reed's family, chosen for familiarity. Reed said he was just a man. They replied, "Come with us, there's something you need to see." Reed followed the alternate versions of himself through a surreal, star-lit pathway to a towering structure in a fabricated pocket reality where normal rules didn't apply. One of the Reeds explained this was where they did their work. When asked where they were headed, he replied, "To meet Reed's brothers." They entered a monumental building adorned with a green and gold emblem. "Welcome to the council," one of them said. Inside, Reed encountered countless alternate versions of himself, each unique in appearance and demeanor. One Reed declared this was a place built by great men where all things were possible. Suddenly, an alarm went off. Universal beacon activated. A Galactus incursion was happening on Earth 2012. The new Reed found the situation unexpected. Another Reed confirmed they did more than just protect Earths. They shaped reality itself. When asked who built the place, he answered, "We did." Reed was told the council was a dream made real, a place to become more than what he was. He was invited to join them. Finally, 3 Reeds stood before him, each wearing a different variant of the Infinity Gauntlet. One told Reed it was time he reached his full potential. Reed stood before them silently, taking in the moment. Chapter 2. On Earth 2012, Reed Richards prepared for battle, declaring he didn't believe in murder. With the council ready, including various versions of himself and allies, he shouted, "Here they come!" As the skies burned red, a massive Galactus descended, flanked by his heralds. The Council of Reeds launched a full assault, combining powers against the cosmic threat. The next morning at the Baxter Building, Reed entered the kitchen, greeted by his children and the team. Ben handed him coffee, saying he looked like he needed it. Sue mentioned an upcoming birthday party for Franklin. The kids discussed guests, with Franklin asking if Spider-Man could come. Johnny mocked the idea, pitching himself as the cooler option. Franklin still preferred Spider-Man. Annoyed, Johnny called Spidey a loser, prompting Franklin to call Johnny Suckface. Sue made Franklin apologize, which he did begrudgingly. Sue confronted Johnny about his attitude. He said he didn't want Franklin embarrassing himself. Sue asked Ben to distract the kids so she could talk to Reed. Ben, carrying a newspaper, agreed. Johnny warned Reed that when the wife's unhappy, it affects the whole team. Sue told Reed he'd been isolating himself. Reed admitted he had. Sue reminded him she respected his work, but didn't want to dictate how he used his time. Reed anticipated her point. Sue voiced her frustration over Reed's detachment. Reed responded with a long explanation. By age 15, he split his first atom. By 25, he created life. He saw the birth and death of stars and became Earth's foremost scientific authority. He wouldn't apologize for knowing what he did. When Sue asked his point, he said he studied many things, but her most of all. As she covered her face in frustration, Reed asked for one more week. On Universe 8901, Day 1, a variant of Reed Richards stood in a golden field, reflecting that he could never accept hunger. He explained to Reed of Earth 616 that he began by terraforming a 25-square-mile patch of barren land, naming it the farm. It now produced food for the needy. The suited Reed urged his counterpart to stop thinking small, saying it takes time to acclimate to the council and its capabilities. He revealed he had hundreds of such worlds and encouraged Reed to imagine without limits. Pretend there is no horizon. Inside a facility, the suited Reed led the other to a glowing green portal and mentioned a shipment was about to go through. When asked why he didn't use the Infinity Gauntlet he wore to simply snap and solve hunger, he explained it didn't function outside its universe. He added they operated on a larger scale and that getting one's hands dirty had value. Alien workers were seen packaging supplies and Reed gently cradled a small alien child. On Universe 45, Day 3, Doom was attacked and subdued by a bearded Reed variant wearing the gauntlet. The variant confirmed that the other had seen the farm. With Doom restrained, the bearded Reed said everything had a purpose and declared what followed as a lesson. He forced Doom into a collar that destroyed higher brain functions. Doom screamed, and the variant explained it was a permanent control mechanism, erasing Doom's identity. The original Reed was horrified. He asked why this Doom was treated differently. The variant took him to the hole beneath the council chamber, revealing dozens of lobotomized Dooms, all chanting Doom. He warned that Doom's hunger for power was unmatched and explained explained that on his Earth, Doom's DNA was spliced with his own, so he understood Doom's nature intimately. "I've got some Doom in me," he said. In upper dimensional space, Universe 12498, Day 4, Reed of Earth 616, found the environment disorienting. His guide, another Reed, assured him it was normal and explained that higher dimensional operations took getting used to. They stood before a star system where the guide said scale and will were proportional in this realm. It was how they performed surgery on the universe. He encouraged Reed to explore. Reed observed a variable density star in unnatural decay and, with guidance, carefully removed a dangerous element, fringe dark matter, remnants of the Big Bang. The guide remarked that the universe, like a cruel parent, tried to reclaim its child. Thanks to Reed's intervention, he saved 8 billion lives. Later, Reed confirmed he felt very good about the achievement. The guide acknowledged he had seen the farm, the whole, and now the impossible. He asked Reed if he still wanted to remain a superhero, or if he wanted to join the council and help solve everything. Back at the Baxter Building, Day 5, Reed lay awake beside Sue. She noticed his restlessness, saying she could always tell when something was on his mind. Reed then remembered a moment from his childhood when his father spoke to him. Young Reed admitted that although kids at school liked him, he felt different. His father asked how that was a problem. Reed said others weren't like him. His father responded, "No one is." He told young Reed that he was special and one day he'd have the opportunity to help lots of people, maybe even everyone. If Reed set his mind to changing the world, he could do it, because there was nothing he couldn't do. When Reed asked if he really believed that, his father smiled and said, "Son, I know it." On Day 6 at the council, Reed of Earth 616 confirmed his decision to join. He said he'd weighed all options and believed he could do the most good there. As he was welcomed, a great symbol was sounded. The members embraced him, but the bearded Reed exclaimed, "Impossible!" Suddenly the gateway was breached. A Reed Richards from Universe 4280 stumbled in, warning that the council was compromised. He said the invaders believed themselves to be gods, had torn open his mind, and that he had revealed everything about the council. When asked who they were, the response came amid a violent blast. "Not gods, but something close enough." The attackers broke through, revealed to be the Celestials. Reed and the bearded variant stood together, staring up as the massive cosmic beings emerged in a cloud of debris and flame. Reed recognized them instantly and spoke their name, Celestials. Chapter 3. The Celestials launched their attack as chaos erupted. One of the Reeds tried to telepathically read their intentions, but collapsed, saying they saw the council as a staging ground for conquest. The Celestials noticed him and incinerated him instantly. The attackers declared they had removed the intruder from their mind and demanded the others kneel to gain favor. The council members stood defiantly, declaring they had no masters. As the Celestials unleashed their beams, several members of the council were instantly vaporized, leaving behind burning skeletons. One Reed called for cover. The others scattered and began fighting back. One summoned cosmic fire to strike the attackers, while another shouted to defend the council. A muscular Reed led others to the armory. Meanwhile, a red Celestial charged up a massive blast and fired it. In the midst of the chaos, a hooded Reed fired back with a massive weapon. Another Reed called his name. One of the Reeds asked the hooded one to access his universe so that he can get the Infinity Gauntlet. He confirmed he would, though it would kill him. Despite the cost, he agreed, saying it was their only chance. The white-suited Reed activated the Infinity Gauntlet, and the hooded Reed exposed the universe within himself, saying, "For all of us." Power surged as the gauntlet-wielding Reed channeled its energy through the hooded Reed, whose face cracked with light. The unleashed power vaporized several Celestials, blasting through their cosmic armor and shattering their bodies. The gauntlet shone brightly as the remaining Reed, with grim determination, pushed forward in the battle to save the council from annihilation. Reed Richards instructed 5 alternate versions of himself to return to their respective Earths and bring back anything that could help stop the incoming monsters. As they rushed off, he urged them to hurry. Meanwhile, chaos erupted as a giant being fired energy blasts. One of the alternate Reeds was hit, and the Silver Surfer rushed in, while the main Reed extended himself toward another cosmic structure. He reached a massive alien construct, dodging attacks and pushing forward determinedly. Reed swung across space, yelling to activate bridge. He fought through fire and a colossal armored foe, physically pushing through to reach a control mechanism. As Reed activated a button, the Celestial reached through. Reed closed the portal just in time, and the Celestial's hand was cut off off and lay behind him. Reed had escaped and was out of breath. 5 minutes earlier, in Reed's primary lab, Valeria packed essentials while Franklin reminded her not to squish the juice boxes. Franklin found a golden device and showed it to Val, who called it insurance. They both geared up, and Val asked if his robotic horse was ready. Franklin confirmed. They rushed out, saying they didn't want to miss their flight. Elsewhere, Sue Storm confirmed departure procedures with Ben and Johnny. Ben asked if it was okay for them to go, since Sue couldn't contact them once they passed through the New World portal. She reassured them, and Johnny cracked a joke as they boarded. Franklin recalled how Sue had denied their vacation trip, which they agreed was unfair. Val explained it was close to Franklin's birthday, so next year he'd be old enough. They got ready, mounted their mechanical horse, and Franklin launched it. As they flew through the city, Sue quietly walked through corridors, eventually stopping at a sealed door. She placed her hand on it and said softly, "Reed." Sue found Reed deep in his lab, surrounded by calculations and technology. She placed her hand on the sealed door and spoke to him through it. She said she had been thinking, especially about their recent breakfast conversation. She acknowledged how she sometimes forgot what it was like to be him, the one responsible for fixing everything, often without support. She apologized, not for being wrong, but for not always understanding. She admitted she missed him, but told him to take as long as he needed. She'd be waiting when he was done. Moments later, at the council, a battle raged. The Council of Reeds launched a coordinated attack against a massive celestial-like being using specialized weapons. One Reed fired a universal entropy gun, while another opened a breach with an antimatter shell. They delivered a payload of rapid, solid burst energy into the creature. As it burned, one of them muttered, "I hope it hurt." Another reported the enemy was retreating. A wounded ally was carried to safety. The council confirmed 5 enemies escaped through other bridges. A Reed ordered the universes closed and requested a hunting party to pursue the escapees. Prime Reed from Earth, 616, was asked to stay and tend to the wounded. Another Reed praised him for returning with weapons that turned the tide, noting it was the second time he'd saved him. Prime Reed looked somber, replying, "You saved me as well, Reed." Later, the Reed from Earth 4280, now mentally damaged, confessed he had lost his gift after the Celestials probed his mind. He felt empty. Prime Reed offered hope, but Earth 4280. Reed said if he couldn't be fixed, he had nothing left. He warned that the cost of solving everything was everything. Though Prime Reed rejected that path, Earth 4280, Reed insisted it was inevitable. As Reed walked away, the variant said, "You'll be back. You always come back." Finally, Reed recalled a memory with his father, asking him to stay. His father said he couldn't, that there were things he had to do. When Reed asked how long he'd be gone, his father replied, "Too long." Reed wished he could just talk, and his father promised to be around if truly needed. He reminded Reed of the advice he'd given over the years and said he could see what Reed had become. In his lab, Reed instructed the computer to seal and erase the room. He recalled his father's final message, warning him that the world would force him to compromise and make choices he knew were wrong. His father admitted he lacked the strength to be both good and great, but believed Reed could. He stressed that Reed's intelligence was a burden, capable of affecting many, and that without character, his brilliance meant nothing. His father placed his hand over Reed's chest, affirming that without heart, his gifts were meaningless. His father then entrusted all his hopes in Reed, urging him to become what he could not. As the memory closed, his father's words echoed, "I expect more, I expect better." Reed reflected on those expectations, wanting to be a better friend, shown by his camaraderie with Ben and Johnny. He aspired to be a better husband, seen as he embraced Sue, and a better father, smiling while playing with Franklin and Valeria. Emerging from the sealed lab, Reed found Sue waiting. She looked up at him, and he gently rested his hand on the doorway. With a calm expression, he stood in front of Sue as his father's words echoed in his mind, "Be a better man." Adventures on New World. Franklin apologized to his mum, but she reminded him he was still in trouble and asked what happened. He began recounting, saying it started with a man. On the ruined world of New World, a bearded man in armor named Ted Castle ran through the wreckage with an automaton carrying a human brain, Alyssa Moy. Ted warned that someone had activated the portal from the other side, while Alyssa sarcastically said he should have built her a better body. Ted told her he had done the best he could, and at least she wasn't just a brain in a jar anymore. He urged her to hurry before the gateway closed and trapped whoever came through. Alyssa said she was content, but Ted explained their sun had collapsed into a singularity and they were being sucked inside. As space-time buckled, Alyssa warned him about his elevated heart rate and reminded him of his family history. Ted explained they were in a fake world with refugees from 500 years in the future, undergoing accelerated evolution that would kill them all. Suddenly, Ultron's robots confronted them, declaring them trespassers. Ted opened fire and kept running. Another figure led them to a ridge, but they arrived too late. Ben Grimm, Johnny Storm, Franklin and Valeria were already at the portal. Ted exclaimed, "Oh boy!" Ben realized things weren't right, and Johnny noted they had been there just 2 weeks ago. Robots ordered them to stand down. Ben warned them off while Johnny flamed on. The robots attacked, and Ted joined the fight, demanding to know where the rest of the Fantastic Four and Reed Richards were. Ben said the kids should have stayed home. Ted clarified it hadn't been weeks, it had been 8 years. He introduced himself as the builder of New World. Valeria pointed out the portal was broken, and their sun was now a black hole. Ted said he hoped Reed could fix it, but now they had to run before the armies of Lightwave and Ultron arrived. Alyssa Moy, now a brain in a containment unit, warned Ted Castle that bad news had arrived as they witnessed a swarm of Ultron robots closing in. Ted carried Valeria and Franklin as Johnny Storm covered them with flames, and Ben Grimm fought to hold the line. Ben told Ted to get the kids out, assuring he would catch up, then called Johnny the worst travel agent ever. Johnny replied with a simple, "Yeah." Ben furiously smashed robots, grumbling that all he wanted was a nice, quiet vacation. As more robots swarmed in, he kept fighting. Johnny flew past, telling Ben that this definitely wasn't going to be that vacation. A massive explosion rocked the area. The children called out for Uncle Ben, but Ted urged everyone to keep moving. Franklin asked what had happened, and Ted explained that everything had once been fine. A new society had formed for the refugee population of 8 billion. But when their star collapsed into a black hole, New World, now on the edge of the event horizon, experienced faster time flow. The survivors' will broke, and Lightwave and Ultron took over, sparking war. Inside a facility, Ted explained that the population was now kept sedated through the Omnipath, Natalie X. Most were docile and sleepwalking through life. A vision of those still resisting showed people using jetpacks to ascend high enough to let the black hole pull them into space. Ted called this bravery, a kind of ascendance. Valeria asked what lay on the other side, and Ted replied they'd know before he would. As they flew toward a secure location, Ted said they were heading to the only place he knew was safe, the center of the Earth. At the New World capital, Lightwave ordered the Ultrons and Psionics to abduct Valeria. Alex Ultron argued they should honor the pact with Castle, but Lightwave insisted they had to take her. Alex Ultron drew the line there and told Lightwave that he could not help. The fiery Lightwave overruled them all, saying Ben Grimm would bring the others to them. In the fortress holding area, Ben Grimm woke up groggy and found himself imprisoned. A voice told him he'd been unconscious for a while. It was Banner Jr., who revealed he was there by choice, imprisoned by conscience for questioning the current regime. At the wheel in the center of New World, Valeria learned from Ted that the portal was beyond repair and they were stuck. She insisted on rescuing Ben and returning home. He explained that Johnny and Alyssa were already attempting a rescue and showed Ben's location beneath the fortress. When Valeria pressed him about the portal's failure, he admitted the real issue wasn't building it. They lacked two things, a power source and something else. Valeria held up a key item, asking what the second was. Later, outside the fortress, Johnny and Alyssa prepared to infiltrate. Alyssa commented that humans and automatons had split. Johnny and Alyssa entered, noting things were falling apart. Alyssa confirmed their targets were inside. Back at the wheel, the power was activated. Valeria asked for the math to open the portal. Ted explained it required calculations once handled by 100 scientists, calculations only Reed could manage. Valeria confidently claimed she could do it, and told him not to tell anyone she was already smarter than her dad. She said she'd go home once everyone was back. Ted, burdened, said he couldn't leave. He was needed to make constant adjustments to prevent New World from falling into the black hole. Eventually it would fail, but he'd remain, a captain going down with his world. Later, at a table, he shared a sandwich with Franklin, who kindly offered it. At the fortress, Johnny and Alyssa reached Ben's cell. Ben begged to be freed and Alyssa opened the lock, but she began to malfunction. Her systems overloaded, and she cried that she couldn't feel her legs. Her containment broke open as her brain lay on the floor. Then Then Psionics appeared and used her powers to stop Johnny and Ben. Ben accused her of killing Alyssa. She claimed it was inevitable. As she attacked Ben, she revealed plans to use Valeria to create a new portal and send everyone back to Earth without Ted Castle. She crushed Alyssa's brain under her heel, declaring they no longer needed Ted and would teach the people how to live anew. Right then, Banner Jr. appeared and smashed Psionics' skull, killing her instantly. Johnny asked Ben if he was okay, and Ben joked about his ex-girlfriend. Johnny said it was time to go home. Ben asked Banner what he was doing, and Banner replied he was staying, saying he had unfinished business and didn't run. At the wheel, Franklin narrated that when they returned, he asked Ted Castle if he was sure about not coming with them. Ted replied he had to stay, as no one else could do his job. As chaos erupted outside, with ships evacuating and explosions blooming near the black hole, Franklin wondered if anyone else could have piloted the world like Ted did. He questioned whether they'd ever see Lightwave again, the King of Light, or Banner, the Green Man, or the captain of the ship who stayed behind to keep New World from falling apart. Back home, Franklin lay in bed with his mother beside him. He admitted he couldn't sleep. She reminded him how exciting life in their family could be. When the clock showed 12:03 a.m., she pointed out it was after midnight and her favorite day of the year. She kissed him and whispered, "Happy birthday, Franklin," as he smiled and closed his eyes. Days of future Franklin. At the Baxter Building, Valeria, carrying a gift, found Franklin and told him their mum had sent her to get him because everyone was waiting. Franklin asked if she'd finished it, and Val confirmed, holding up the wrapped box. As they walked, he nervously asked if it would work properly. Val assured him he'd be happy. When they entered the room, Franklin noticed no one was there, until suddenly lights came on and everyone shouted, "Surprise!" His birthday party was filled with friends, family, aliens and heroes, including The Thing and Johnny Storm. Val smirked and sarcastically wished him a happy birthday, calling him a retard, while Franklin grinned and told her she better have gotten him something good. Franklin hugged Katie and Jack, excited to see them. Jack said they wouldn't miss a Power Pack reunion. Their mum told Franklin to blow out the candles. He hesitated, embarrassed, but she gently urged him, and he did. As everyone gathered for cake, she asked who wanted some. Reed Richards spoke with Alex about his family's visit. Alex said they'd flown in the previous night, and the kids had barely slept from excitement. Reed noted they looked tired. In the background, Lockheed flew by. Reed asked Alex how school was going. Alex said it was boring and frustrating, especially for someone his age expected to be doing postgraduate work. Reed asked what was next for him, and Alex admitted he didn't know. Reed offered him a role in a special upcoming project. Meanwhile, the kids played as Franklin led them. Sue offered Bentley cake, but he corrected her. His name was 32, the 32nd clone of Bentley Whitman. He said the previous 31 were unnamed failures. He hoped to earn a name by being exceptional. Sue gave him the cake anyway. Ben gathered everyone and announced a special guest. A kid dressed as Spider-Man entered, making the kids laugh. They quickly pointed out it wasn't the real one. Ben turned to find the real Spider-Man clinging to his back. The kids lit up with joy. The kids spotted the real Spider-Man clinging to Ben's back. Everyone pointed and laughed, while Johnny Storm groaned, mocking Spidey's dramatic entrance. He complained that Spider-Man never just walked in like a normal person and compared it to his own powers, saying he never made a scene. Meanwhile, Ben greeted Spider-Man warmly. Spidey thanked him for the lift and looked around, asking who the birthday boy was. When Franklin shouted that it was him, Spider-Man grinned and invited him for a ride. Franklin eagerly accepted, and Spider-Man swung through the air with him. Lockheed joined in the air as they soared above the crowd. Val watched with folded arms, while Sue and Johnny smiled from below. Sue commented, "Well," and Johnny replied, "At least the kid's having a good time." Later, Leach asked for everyone's attention. Franklin thanked everyone for coming and their gifts, but announced he had gifts for them too. Sue, surprised, asked what it was. Franklin said he hadn't known everyone would come, so he'd originally planned to mail them gift certificates. Jack confirmed there was one for him and Julie. Franklin told Spider-Man he hadn't known what to get him, but tried anyway. Spidey unwrapped a book titled A Loser's Guide to Picking Up Women, prompting laughter. Franklin said he got help from Uncle Johnny and jokingly called himself a giver. Franklin handed Leach a key and explained it was for a new room, offering him a place to stay. Leach was touched. Franklin then gave Artie a helmet, saying it was designed by Val to help with communication after he lost his mutant projection powers. He told Artie to focus, and it worked. The helmet projected hearts and the 4.5 logo. Overjoyed, Artie hugged Franklin, who welcomed them home. Sue and Reed embraced. Reed admitted he didn't know about Franklin's Franklin's plan and praised the Richards kids. Sue asked if it was a good birthday. Franklin said it was great. Reed began to compliment her appearance, but she cut him off playfully. The party continued joyfully with the kids playing and the adults chatting. That night, alarms blared. Time quake, condition, red. A fiery vortex tore through a hallway, cracking walls as it surged forward. A man in a black suit emerged from a flaming portal, stating that the containment field was active and the clock was running. He noted that, as expected, company was arriving. The Fantastic Four, Sue, Johnny, Reed, and Ben, rushed toward him, but he raised a barrier, blocking their way. Sue confirmed the path was blocked. Johnny tried to burn through it, but failed. Reed examined the barrier and said it extended into the wall and was impenetrable. Franklin, standing nearby with his teddy bear, asked what was happening. Sue reacted with horror as they realized Franklin was on the other side of the barrier with the intruder. The man reached for Franklin, and Johnny tried to stop him with fire, but it was useless. Sue screamed, "No," as she watched the man slowly knocking Franklin out with telekinesis, and then laying him down on the ground unconscious. She furiously vowed to hunt him down, no matter how long it took, and make him regret ever being born. The man escaped into another corridor using a green circular device. Inside a dark room, the man approached Valeria. He assured her he wouldn't harm her. Val cautiously asked who he was and why he was there. He knelt and said he had been sent to warn her. The future must be avoided at all costs. In a surreal moment with childlike drawings appearing in the background, he told Val there would be a war between the four cities, that the dead must not be forgotten, and the future man must return to save the past. He ended with a cryptic message: "All hope lies in doom." Val asked why she should believe him. He answered, "Because you're the one who sent me here." As time ran out, Reed and the others arrived, seeing the man via a projection. He told Val she had to do this just before leaving. As he disappeared, Val called out, "Hey!" and he turned asking, "Yes?" Val called out, "Happy birthday, retard!" just before the intruder prepared to leave. The man was none other than Franklin from the future. Behind a force field, the Fantastic Four and others rushed in as old Franklin activated his device and vanished. Ben called out to Val while Sue and Reed ran to her side. Reed asked if she was okay, and Val assured him she was fine, saying everything's fine. Later, the team gathered in the kitchen. Sue mentioned the kids were finally in bed and asked for a report. Johnny said he found nothing, no camera or log evidence of the event. Reed said he ran every test on the kids, and everything checked out, even better than usual. Val told him nothing happened in her room, that she hid until the man left. Reed quietly stated they got lucky. In her room, Val stared out the window, drawing complex equations on the glass. Franklin remembered what the bearded man had told him. He told him to rest and remember who he was. In his room, Franklin, alone under a blanket, created a baby universe in his hands. Prime Elements. Chapter 1. The abandoned city of High Evolutionary, near the Baxter Building in New York City. Several figures emerged from the sewers. Moliods, cloaked and humanoid, crawling out from beneath a manhole cover. As they cautiously made their way into the street, a truck slammed into some of them, sending bodies flying. One of the Moloids' heads was knocked off. Despite the collision, the remaining Moloids carried the head and regrouped and entered the Baxter Building lobby. Inside, a security alert was triggered. Recognition override identified them as hostile, and the system began alerting authorities. The Fantastic Four, Mr. Fantastic, Invisible Woman, Human Torch, and the Thing were already present and quickly responded. As the Moloids entered, the Human Torch asked what they were doing there. One Moloid stepped forward, saying he brought a message from the Mole Man. Ben Grimm threatened him to speak quickly. Mr. Fantastic prompted, "Well?" The Moloid simply said, "Please clear the lobby." A loud rumble followed, and a massive creature burst from beneath the floor. The creature, accompanied by the Mole Man and more monstrous allies, stood before the Fantastic Four. Mole Man called them his oldest adversaries and warned that the subterranean world was in chaos. He claimed only the Fantastic Four could help. Later, inside the Baxter Building lab, Mole Man showed a projected image of the problem area, which Reed Richards read as a geothermal vent. A Moloid explained that the location was actually the Ascension engine powering the abandoned underground city. Mole Man revealed the city was a failed experiment by the high evolutionary Herbert Wyndham. The city, intended to be a sanctuary for evolutionary experiments, used the Ascension engine to speed evolution. Instead, it devolved its inhabitants. The high evolutionary and his followers fled, unable to shut down the engine. Mole Man's Moloids later later discovered the city and entered it unknowingly. Inside, they found that the de-evolved form of a Moloid resembled a human. Now, who could have thought that? Mole Man explained that if the High Evolutionary had stayed in the city while the engine was fully powering up, his intelligence would have increased to superhuman levels. Sue asked the disembodied head, formerly a Moloid, if the change was permanent. The head confirmed that for those born in the city like himself, it was. He had left the city because they were viewed as outcasts. Franklin told him he could stay with them if needed. Johnny, holding the head's jar, bluntly asked how any of this related to them. Mole Man responded that the Fantastic Four had to help him raise the city. Later, deep within Aeolus's cave leading to Subterranea, the Fantastic Four and Mole Man descended in a ship. Reed warned everyone to get comfortable, noting the ship wasn't designed for this terrain and things might get rough. Sue questioned why they didn't just drill down. Reed explained that doing so could cause the cavern to collapse and trigger a seismic event due to the fault line the city rested on. He said this path was safer and that he had been there before. As they flew deeper, Johnny was shocked to see something. Mole Man confirmed it was the buried body of Galactus from the future, marking the underworld's edge. The ship continued into a vivid, alien-like subterranean landscape. Mole Man commented on its beauty. The Thing replied that he wasn't admiring the view, but watching for any betrayal that the Mole Man might have planned next. Mole Man insisted he had changed, but Ben wasn't convinced. As they moved through the crystalline caverns, Mole Man said he no longer cared about the surface world and only wanted his kingdom. Ben questioned whether he intended to enslave the Moloids. Mole Man claimed the city's Moloids had stopped reproducing and instead absorbed his people to grow in number. Evolution had done something strange to them. They now kept the children abandoned below the city as pets. When they stopped, Ben asked if it was the end of the line. Mole Man said no, they were going much deeper. Johnny melted the rocks to pave the way as Sue guided their ship into the cavern city of Lechugilia. The Fantastic Four's ship traveled deeper, passing beneath the cavern city of Lechugilia and into the underwater city of Merrimek. Moloids gathered at the shoreline as Mole Man led the group onward. The ship plunged into the water, navigating through aquatic tunnels filled with strange sea creatures. Emerging on the other side, it hovered over a cave with countless Moloids inside. Mole Man announced they were approaching their final destination. Inside the ship, Mole Man pointed ahead, prompting Sue, Reed, and Ben to focus. They reached two enormous statues flanking a giant gate. Mole Man identified it as the abandoned city of the High Evolutionary. Crowds of Moloids flooded toward the entrance. As the team assessed the situation, Ben realized they were too late. The city had already begun to rise, and Reed warned that the entire cavern would collapse. Sue insisted they needed to leave, but Ben, determined, told Reed to stick around as long as you can and leapt out of the ship. Reed called after him, but Ben apologized and took off. As Ben entered the rising city, he started to devolve, and his form changed. With whatever powers he had in control, he confronted one of the evolved humanoids, demanding to know what was happening and where the children were. The man cryptically said the city changes people, and revealed that the children were kept on the underside of the city like animals. Ben lit a torch and began moving through the structures, jumping across rooftops until he smashed down into the lower level. There he found a few Moloid children, one carrying a baby. Ben asked where the others were, and the child told him they were all that's left. Ben told them to come with him and promised to get them out. As the cavern continued collapsing, Sue created a force field at the ship's door and spotted Ben returning with the children. She yelled that the roof was about to give in. Ben entered with the children, and Sue ordered the kids to buckle in. Johnny yelled at Reed to launch. As panic built, Johnny questioned where they would go as the world crumbled around them. Reed told Sue to shield them. As he grabbed the controls, he muttered, "Here we go." The Fantastic Four's ship burst out of the ground in a fiery explosion as rocks rained down. Later, outside the ship, Sue asked if Mole Man had left. Reed confirmed he had slithered back underground to rally what was left of his kingdom. Reed explained that the rising city didn't crack the earth. Instead, it sealed itself and formed a solid foundation beneath. Sue wondered what would happen next. Reed expected accusations, fear, and politics, but said the newcomers were here to stay. Johnny teased Ben about his transformation, saying people loved monkeys. Ben grumbled and told him to shut up. Sue asked if the children were settled. Ben said yes, but noted something strange about them. Reed explained they had inhuman perspectives and unnatural intelligence. They were products of the city. Johnny wasn't worried, saying they weren't beyond handling. The four stood together, looking at the towering statue and the risen city below. Ben muttered, "Ain't that something?" In the aftermath, 1 hour and 23 minutes after leaving the city, Ben Grimm reverted to his non-devolved form. Tests suggested Level A containment suits could block the Ascension engine's effects. 4 days later, US diplomats began talks with the High Evolutionaries Forever City over territorial rights. Negotiations stalled when Forever City demanded recognition as an independent nation-state. Checkpoints were set up to limit access, while mediation continued. After 2 weeks, the Maloid children rescued from the city showed no signs of diminished intelligence, confirming the lasting impact of the city's evolution process on those born or altered within its influence. Chapter 2: The Old Kings of Atlantis. Sue told the team to focus, despite the chaos from the super-smart Maloid kids. She introduced Vostok Station, a Russian facility built in the 1950s, notable for being the most isolated base in Antarctica. In 1973, radar imaging discovered a massive suspended body of water 13,000 feet below Lake Vostok. The lake had been untouched for over 500,000 years, possibly allowing for an entirely divergent evolutionary path. Scientists failed to penetrate it with traditional tools, despite thermal data and ice core samples. 4 years ago, new scanning tech revealed a superstructure at the lake's heart. The Future Foundation got involved, initiating a slow, steady, deep-sea probe program. Johnny and Ben bantered about the turtle versus rock metaphor. Sue pressed forward, wanting to explain. Reed entered and revealed AM had hacked their Antarctic systems and started slant drilling from 5 miles away. They planned to send vehicles into the lake within 24 hours. Reed said they no longer had time for probes. It had to be a manned mission. He had already volunteered for the team. Sue asked why, and Reed simply said exploration was what they did best. Johnny joked about beating people up and dating hot women. Sue announced they'd leave in 45 minutes. Ben threw Johnny into the wall for his comment. 4 hours later, the team arrived at their own polar base. Johnny, dressed in just shorts and a fur-lined hood, joked, "Did someone order pizza?" At the Vostok Exploratory Station, Sue greeted Dr. Calvin Cooley and introduced Reed. Cal praised Reed, but Reed credited Sue for running the day-to-day operations. Susan asked when they could launch. Cal said they were ready, but had some concerns. The pod had to break through an ice shield and enter a noisy thermal vent, too loud for radio communication. He warned them to consider aborting the mission. Sue responded with a smile to Reed, "Let's go for a swim." 30 minutes after deployment, the descent module reached a speed of 82.25 meters per second, hitting the upper limit of descent. Technicians tracked the countdown as it crashed through the ice layers and into the ocean below. The Fantastic Four, clad in deep-sea gear, exited the vessel and swam into the underwater cavern. They encountered glowing marine life and humanoid merfolk. When Ben was pulled toward a glowing lava crater, Sue quickly formed a force field to pull him back. As the group gathered, Johnny pointed in surprise. Above them was a stunning crystalline ceiling made of sharp, massive ice formations. Suddenly, another descent vehicle from a rival team arrived, releasing pods that triggered rumbling through the terrain. From the disturbance, a massive, golden, tentacled machine emerged and began tearing through the ice structure. Missiles launched from the machine, drawing in giant, squid-like creatures. The Fantastic Four and the merfolk watched as one creature was hit and exploded, letting out a pained screech. Then the attackers from the ship joined in, provoking a violent confrontation. A fierce battle unfolded. The merfolk fought to defend their home, but some were killed, while several invaders were torn apart by sea creatures. The Fantastic Four jumped into action. Sue encased Ben in a force field and hurled him into the enemy craft. Ben smashed his way inside, damaging it from within. Meanwhile, Sue ripped open the front of the ship with her powers. The merfolk watched as the tide turned. They saw who had come to destroy them, and who had risked everything to defend them. Now they knew who their true allies were. Reed examined a fleshy growth on the wall and called it amazing. He explained to the team that it was a telepathic communication device. Johnny complained about how ridiculous he looked in the gear, prompting playful jabs from Sue and Ben. The team followed their aquatic escorts through the ancient corridors of the city. They passed undersea creatures and structures as Sue wondered aloud where they were being taken. Johnny remarked that the area looked like the world's biggest sushi bar. As they continued, a stern aquatic warrior approached, prompting Ben to joke about Johnny's appearance. Reed pointed out that their escort might be royalty. The group was then ordered forward to stand before a throne. A regal figure introduced herself as Ul-Uhar, regent of the Peak and king of the Uhari, welcoming them to the kingdom of Atlantis. Reed expressed disbelief, saying Atlantis had been destroyed. Ul-Uhar replied that Atlantis was the sea itself, and that where there is water and life, there are giants. He explained that the three races before them, Uhari, Mala, and Kordai, were the last to survive the Great Fall, each with distinct roles. Uhari questioned why two surface groups came from above, yet one brought violence while the other protected them. Reed tried to explain humanity was not a collective and had no single speaker. Ul-Uhar pressed on, asking who then speaks for mankind. Reed hesitated, but Susan stepped forward, volunteering. Reed tried to stop her, but Sue insisted, saying they would understand her and that she had to be the one. Ul-Uhar asked her to introduce herself. Sue replied confidently, "I am Susan Storm Richards." Ul-Uhar acknowledged her as more than just her name. She was adorned in ceremonial garments as Ul-Uhar declared her Susan of the Richards, Susan of the Storm, envoy of man and emissary of the Peak. She was told to return and spread the word, as the old kings of Atlantis had returned. Susan declared, "I speak for all mankind." Before leaving the Peak, Susan Richards received an access device called the Spiral for future communication. The old kingdom beneath Lake Vostok is sustained by hydrodynamic power from the lake's current and a thermal vent. Three surviving races exist there: the Uhari, fish-like workers; the Mala, crab-like legal class; and the Kordai, eel-like warriors. After returning from Antarctica, Susan attempted to unite undersea cultures peacefully by reaching out to King Namor through Utopia. Her hope was to establish diplomatic relations between surface and sea dwellers. However, as of now, King Namor has not responded to her message. Chapter 3: Universal Inhumans. 6 months earlier, the Inhuman royal family prepared for a bold departure into the far reaches of space. But as the time of the gathering approached, a difficult choice had to be made. One of their own had to remain behind on the moon to oversee the sacred event. Black Bolt and Medusa selected Dal Damok for the task, entrusting him with the responsibility of guarding the lunar site and initiating the summoning. With the ritual complete, the royal family and their people launched into the cosmos, leaving Dal as the lone sentinel. 2 months ago, Dal Damok continued his solitary vigil, watching the slow and steady arrival of the summoned. The cosmic activity didn't go unnoticed. Uatu the Watcher also turned his gaze toward the moon. Eventually, the moment arrived. A colossal alien vessel materialized in orbit above the moon, and Dal, ever watchful, quietly signaled the Watcher to take notice. The sudden arrival of the mysterious ship caught the attention of Earth's greatest explorers, the Fantastic Four. Back on Earth, Mr. Fantastic assembled his team for a debrief. With no clear intel on the vessel or its intentions, he urged caution and readied the group for a mission to the moon. 30 minutes later, the Fantastic Four launched from the Baxter Building. In no time, they had reached lunar orbit and descended in a landing capsule, touching down near the ruins of the Blue Area. As they approached the alien ship, Reed Richards detected several life forms aboard. Before they could explore further, Dal Damok greeted them. Recognizing the Fantastic Four as old allies of the Inhuman royal family, he welcomed them warmly and announced the beginning of a new chapter for the Inhuman race. Dal led the team into the vast city ship and began explaining the magnitude of what was unfolding. He described a vision where 4 different species, all bearing inhuman heritage, would unite into one powerful collective. Their first stop was to meet Eldrak the Doorway, once a politician, now transformed into a living portal capable of transporting beings across dimensions. Dal also recounted the origin of the Inhumans, reminding the team that Earth's Inhumans were created when the Kree experimented on early humans. But what surprised the team most was Dal's revelation that the Kree hadn't stopped with Earth. According to Dal, the Kree had experimented on 5 different species across the universe. Each underwent its own form of transformation, creating unique branches of inhumanity. While Earth's Inhumans gained powers through the terrigen mists in a process called terrigenesis. The other races developed through different methods. Dahl introduced the Fantastic Four to the leaders of these distant races, the universal Inhumans. First was Ula Udonta, sovereign of the Centurion royal family. Then came Aladi Ko Eke, leader of the Maud Brood Council. Queen Onomi White Mane stood for the Chimelian White Room. Lastly, there was Goddess Avoe, ruler of the Dire Wraiths. Each queen had journeyed to the moon to unite under Black Bolt, the king of Earth's Inhumans. Together they sought to establish a new sanctified homeland, New Hala. But as Reed and his team listened, unease settled in. The intent wasn't simply to colonize the moon. These new arrivals had their sights set on Earth itself. Further exploration revealed the sheer scale of the city ship. The Fantastic Four learned that the vessel housed a large population of universal Inhumans, entire civilizations thriving within its walls. But not all aboard were free. Over 700 dangerous individuals were imprisoned deep within the ship's black level, held under tight security. Dahl also introduced the Light Brigade, a revered group of 6 elite Inhuman warriors drawn from various races. These champions were selected to participate in a trial known as the Offering, a gauntlet of challenges designed to test their worthiness to serve the collective. The ritual was as dangerous as it was symbolic. Historically, no Light Brigade had survived beyond a single year. What began as a peaceful visit for the Fantastic Four quickly escalated into a situation filled with questions and potential conflict. A new era of Inhuman unity was unfolding, one that could reshape the fate of Earth itself. Chapter 4. The Cult of the Negative Zone. Johnny recounted his story to Valeria, beginning with meeting a mysterious woman at a club. She asked why she was telling him everything again, and he reminded her that he had asked nicely. She insisted nothing seemed unusual that night. Then she suggested they go back to his place. Johnny offered to drive. Johnny reflected on the club. Its name was The Other Side of Zero. It was a high-tech chain club. A strange stage show was being led by a man calling himself the Anti-Priest, who delivered a speech about escaping fate and embracing new rules for life. The club's vibe was off, so Johnny and the woman left for the Baxter Building. Johnny brought the woman to the Baxter Building. He offered her a drink, which she refused. She expressed fascination with the tech around her, saying she loved gadgets. He led her toward his room, promising a great view, while she secretly felt drawn to something else. She approached the negative zone portal, alarming Johnny. He warned her of its danger, but she said that was the reason she came. Then she knocked him out. While Johnny lay dazed, she accessed the control panel and revealed her true motive. She said they knew Johnny would be at the club and chose her for her beauty. She called humanity predictable, claimed she wanted to die, and walked toward the portal. Covered in black tears, she explained the universe's eventual death and how the negative zone reversed that fate. She believed the Anti-Priest's teachings and prepared to let something through. As she chanted a word, bugs emerged and crawled out of her body. Johnny watched in horror as more bugs crawled out. The woman collapsed, and the creatures dragged a device out of her body and flew into the negative zone. Back in control, Johnny told the Herbie robot to keep the portal open. He was going in to stop them from using the bomb. Igniting into the Human Torch, he vowed to clean up the mess. Johnny Storm, now the Human Torch, arrived in the negative zone to find a massive alien structure under siege. Green energy tendrils surged skyward as armored soldiers worked frantically at a control station. Below, Annihilus's insect-like creatures swarmed. Johnny called himself an idiot for letting this happen. Inside the control room, one soldier warned his superior. The armada of Annihilus had arrived. Meanwhile, Johnny spotted the creatures carrying a bomb and shouted for them to stop it. The general dismissed the threat, confident their shields were impenetrable as long as the cosmic control rod was active. But one of the bugs latched onto the control rod, and a soldier screamed, "No!" as the insect secured the bomb to the rod. A massive explosion erupted. Johnny was caught in the blast, but survived, stunned and smoldering. The general, dazed, was soon surrounded by swarming bugs. They overpowered him and began tearing him apart. Johnny stood in front of the portal, recovering, as the creatures chanted in their alien tongue. He told them to shut up and unleashed a wave of fire. Several bugs were incinerated instantly, squealing in pain. More emerged from above, winged reinforcements ready to swarm. Despite the flames, Johnny looked around at the sheer number and realized how outnumbered he was. One of the bugs lunged, Johnny torched it, but saw others closing in, more aggressive than before. Their screeches filled the air as they surrounded him from all sides. His fire flared with intensity, but so did the swarm's fury. The battle escalated quickly. Johnny, overwhelmed but still defiant, prepared for another fiery attack as he said, "Uh-oh." Valeria Richards asked Johnny to repeat himself. Johnny talked about the negative zone. The city there was under siege. Ships from the negative zone were bombarding buildings with missiles and lasers, setting the city on fire to kill the annihilous bugs. Johnny Storm explained to Valeria that the negative zone had expanded to the size of a city. When she asked what that meant, Johnny downplayed it, saying nothing had happened then. He added that being pulled from sleep to fighting in the negative zone in 5 minutes was not ideal, and he accepted that his day had already gone off the rails. Valeria, meanwhile, was taking notes. In the negative zone, Johnny fought insect-like creatures and jumped out. He desperately called for the Herbie robot to close the gate. Later, Johnny sat with Valeria on a couch as she drank juice and continued working on the device. He asked why she was so interested in all of this. Valeria replied that she needed to keep learning and feed the beast. Johnny asked if there was anything they should be concerned about. Valeria dismissed him with a sarcastic, "How would I know something like that?" Meanwhile, south of the Baxter Building and deep underwater, Sue Richards escorted Andromeda Atumasen, Andromeda the Sword, who came with a message from Namor. Andromeda boldly questioned the court's authority, demanding to know who they were to call themselves kings. Ul-Uhar angrily responded, "You dare," just as the chamber began to rumble. The entire kingdom began to rise, while Namor's message continued, questioning who could call themselves king if they had never felt sunlight, who cowered beneath the ice, and who slept through the age of man. The Atlantean kingdom rose up, protected in a bubble. The message ended with a warning. When the kings had answers and emerged from hiding, Namor would meet them then. The Heroic Age. Chapter 1. The Future Foundation. At the Singularity Conference 2010 in Golden, Colorado, the host introduced Reed Richards as the final speaker, praising him as the founder and a titan of science. Reed received applause as he took the stage and recalled how the forum began with just 30 people in a small room. He expressed his original vision for the conference, to gather great minds to tackle present challenges while looking forward, to ask and answer the hard questions. He praised Jennifer Walters for her speech on the legal and moral dilemmas of synthetic humanity, calling it the kind of insight the conference was meant to spotlight. However, Reed criticized other speakers, like Dr. Chang, for turning politics into science, and Thomas for promoting defeatist ideas. He said he had spent the weekend wondering what happened to the pioneering spirit that once defined the group, and then realized they'd grown old. Reed argued that humanity stood on the edge of a transformative era, one more advanced than ever. But despite that, the attendees had grown fearful of the future. He singled out Dr. Clark's stance on limiting humanity's population as cowardly and narrow-minded. Reed declared that humanity's future was not about survival but expansion, about reaching beyond Earth into the galaxy. He questioned if he should follow the great explorers like Magellan or Armstrong, or become like the current crowd. He said it was time for a new generation and announced his resignation from the body. He declared he wouldn't return to the cave because the fire of discovery still burned within him. The next week, Reed arrived by jet, greeted by a young man named Alex Power. Friday helped unload his things. As Reed and Alex walked, Alex expressed insecurity, calling himself the dumbest on the list. Reed reassured him, saying his unique perspective from otherworldly experience was invaluable. They laughed about Alex's perfect SAT score, with Reed joking that it'd be useful when drinking beer and chasing women. At the peak in Old Atlantis, Susan Storm met with the Atlantean king. He acknowledged her request was unusual, but admitted the era was changing. Atlantis had begun to explore beyond its traditional waters. He confessed that the shift stirred something in him he hadn't felt in a long time, restlessness and the ability to dream. Susan smiled, assuring him that old men could still dream. The king agreed to her request, promising she would have what she asked for. At the Baxter Building in New York City, Spider-Man swung past while inside. The small group of Malloyd children interacted in a messy room. Turg, the head, told the others that the humans allowed them to live there as long as they wanted. The child named Tong urged the others not to spoil the arrangement. The baby, Kor, excitedly pointed out the abundance of food and books. Tong said that he and Kor had taught themselves to read the day before. Kor recited a refined quote, impressing the others. Another child, Mick, wrote equations on the window and explained that he had learned computing and accessed the Baxter Building's information stream. He revealed a theory that a curved axis runs from the Forever City through Old Atlantis to a city on the moon, and that this axis mirrored the portal frequency to the negative zone. He asked if this meant anything, and another confirmed it did. They concluded Reed had asked for their help, and they should ask Ben for approval. If he agreed, they'd provide it. On New World, events unfolded across time. In year 17, Dr. Ted Castle created a time bubble to shield his lab from a dying sun's distortion. In year 105, he genetically engineered synthetic Alyssa Moy replicas. In year 506, Ultron colonized a moon for rapid construction. In year 197, human society was reshaped under nanotech and cosmic energy. In year 221, Lord Lightwave longed for purpose beyond service to Galactus. In year 326, Banner Jr. continued to age in solitude. Back at the Baxter Building, Franklin practiced martial arts, announcing he was the good guy, ready to punch the bad guys' faces in. He struggled to find a signature phrase. The adults, Johnny, Ben, and Dragon Man, watched and gave light-hearted feedback. They encouraged him to let his catchphrase come naturally. Valeria, perched on Dragon Man's back, asked Ben for a screwdriver. Ben handed it to her and asked what she was working on. She explained she was trying to improve Dragon Man, making him smarter and more useful. However, she admitted that the way he was put together didn't make sense. There was a CPU, but no firmware or OS. She found it frustrating that whoever created him hadn't built a more elegant solution. Ben shrugged and left to watch Franklin fight, reminding him that what matters is not posturing, but what comes afterward. Franklin nodded and resumed his training, declaring, "Time to die, buttheads." Franklin engaged in an intense martial arts match against Artie and Leech. Artie used his powers to project a glowing image of a martial artist with button prompts, helping guide Franklin's moves. Leech joined the brawl, kicking an enemy and yelling that the snacks were his alone. Meanwhile, Valeria finished her work, and Dragon Man burst into action, breathing fire. She quickly realized her fix had gone too far. Dragon Man launched a coordinated digital attack mid-combat, guided by a projection from Artie. A stunned ninja fell back, realizing too late. Valeria, holding up her pen, asked Artie how he managed to hack it. Smiling, she said her dad was going to love this. At the Pavlov Metahuman Psychiatric Facility, the wizard ranted incoherently about mitosis, divine structure, and apocalyptic visions. Dr. Calvin noted that the wizard's mental condition had deteriorated. He now believed in divine purpose and had undergone a conversion. Reed Richards arrived and handed over a box, reassuring the staff it had been stripped of danger. Dr. Calvin handed it to Wizard, calling it Providence. The wizard gleefully put on a helmet from the box, claiming he was born again. Facing Reed through a glass wall, he greeted him sarcastically. Reed said he'd promised to visit. Wizard, now calm but intense, said he prayed for Reed every night to fix the world. Reed listened silently. Afterward, Reed walked away, saddened by the wizard's state, but more determined. He told the wizard that his clone, Bentley 23, uncorrupted, was living with his family. Reed vowed to prove that the boy could become something better. The wizard screamed that people cannot change, but Reed disagreed, saying he would offer the boy something the wizard had forsaken. Back at the Baxter Building, Reed Richards addressed a classroom of young minds. He said they would begin their journey together, focusing on their ongoing, never-ending education. He explained that their curriculum would start with survival and reach to the edge of an eternal tomorrow. Standing before a blackboard labeled The Future, Reed laid down the rule. It would be one class, and it would be pass or fail. He welcomed them to the Future Foundation. In the classroom sat the new members: Alex Power, Valeria Richards, Bentley 23, Artie Maddox, Leech, Dragon Man, Tong, Turg, Kor, Mick, Vil, and Wu from Atlantis, and Franklin Richards. Reed declared they could accomplish anything together. Chapter 2. The Franktastic Four. Franklin, Richards and Leach found themselves bored and restless, so they set off in search of someone who could take them to the grand launch of the latest Impossible Man toy collection at Arcade Toys. Their first stop was a Future Foundation meeting, where the team was deep into tackling a long-standing challenge, one that Mr. Fantastic himself had never been able to solve. Franklin eagerly asked Reed if he could take them out, but Reed, focused on the problem at hand, gently told his son he couldn't today. However, he added that Uncle Johnny was downstairs and ready to accompany them. Disappointed that his father couldn't come along, Franklin reluctantly agreed to go. Down in the lobby, Johnny immediately noticed Franklin's letdown. Trying to cheer him up, he shared a bit of his own childhood. He said he'd struggled with the same feeling. His father always paid more attention to Susan. Johnny reassured Franklin that Reed loved him just as much as Valeria. It was just that Valeria shared more of Reed's scientific mind, making her easier for Reed to connect with. Then, in an attempt to lift their spirits, Johnny whipped out Reed's gold credit card, exciting the boys. He suggested that Human Torch toys were likely all the rage, only to be stung when Franklin and Leach showed more enthusiasm for Spider-Man and Iron Man figures. At Arcade Toys, the kids wandered around in awe, checking out the vibrant displays. Suddenly, Johnny did a double take. He recognized the store's owner as Arcade, the notorious assassin. Arcade, with a disarming grin, insisted he had turned over a new leaf and was now just a toy mogul. Johnny remained suspicious, especially when he learned that Arcade had partnered with the unpredictable Impossible Man for this venture. Arcade assured them the store was safe, no traps, just fun. During the ribbon-cutting ceremony, the Impossible Man unveiled a wild toy line, each toy said to contain a small piece of himself. Moments later, Arcade dropped the act. He attempted to smash the Impossible Man with an oversized anvil. The attempt failed, but he triggered a hidden mechanism, activating the entire line of toys and turning them hostile. The toy army swarmed Johnny, Franklin, Leach, and Impossible Man. Leach was soon knocked unconscious, and with his power suppression aura gone, Franklin's abilities kicked in. He used his powers to restrain Arcade, while Johnny unleashed a wave of fire that reduced the rogue toys to ash. With the threat ended, Impossible Man thanked them all for saving the day. As they left, Johnny grinned, hearing the kids finally admit they were now fans of the Human Torch. Meanwhile, on New World, centuries raced by. At year 515, Dr. Ted Castle completed a robotic recreation of Alyssa Moy. By year 648, Castle and Moy 2515 managed to break free of the temporal distortion and returned to Earth. Outside the time bubble, the Ultron Collective had swelled to full capacity. At year 820, Natalie X's physical body expired, but her consciousness endured, taking control of New World's entire synthetic population. By year 1003, Lord Lightwave remained locked in memory, lost in dreams of his past. And by year 1217, Banner Jr. had evolved into the Maestro, immense in power and fully transformed. Back on Earth, the Future Foundation sat down with Ben Grimm for a serious discussion. They revealed progress on a long-sought goal, a temporary cure for his transformation. Explaining the current constraints of the formula, they told him the best outcome for now was a return to human form for 1 week each year. Ben took the offer without hesitation, seeing it as his one chance to feel normal again. Alex Power handed him the serum, congratulating him on regaining a sliver of the humanity he had lost. Interlude: A Little Stranger. A young woman named Amy Bryce arrived at the Baxter Building right in the middle of one of Reed Richards' anti-G multi-mine tests. Her unexpected appearance threw the team into chaos as they rushed to halt the trial before she got hurt. Once she was safe, the team questioned how she'd even gotten in. Reed discovered she'd used Johnny Storm's keycard. Amy explained that she was trying to find Johnny, but the team, covering for him, claimed he might be in the negative zone. In truth, Sue was using her invisibility powers to hide Johnny, who was standing right there. When confronted, Johnny admitted he had met Amy 2 months ago during a one-night fling. Before the conversation could go any further, one of Reed's alarms went off. He noticed an energy signature identical to the one Sue emitted when she was pregnant. They quickly realized what it meant. Amy was carrying Johnny's child. Johnny dashed outside to catch up with her. Amy clarified that she wasn't chasing fame or fortune. She just needed to speak to him. Suddenly, the two were attacked by bizarre mechanical entities. The rest of the Fantastic Four joined the battle, helping Johnny destroy the attackers. Afterward, they brought Amy back for a thorough checkup. Reed hypothesized that someone was after the unborn child. To investigate further, he asked Sue to shrink down and retrieve a DNA sample directly from the fetus, while Johnny and Ben used the temporal scanner to revisit the night Johnny met Amy. Miniaturized, Sue was injected into Amy's body and swam through her bloodstream toward the fetus. Meanwhile, Johnny and Ben went to the nightclub from that night and scanned the past. There, they saw an unusual woman who suddenly shrunk and released microscopic probes into Johnny's body to extract a DNA sample. Back at the lab, Sue encountered hostile androids inside Amy and had to fight them off. She destroyed them and signaled for extraction. When Johnny and Ben returned, they relayed what they'd seen, and Sue described the attackers she had just defeated. The DNA sample was secured, and Reed ran a diagnostic on Johnny. He discovered a tiny organism in Johnny's brain, immune to his flame powers. To uncover what it was, Reed had Ben and Sue miniaturized and sent into Johnny's brain. There, they encountered their enemy, the Psycho Woman. She overpowered both of them with ease. Realizing they needed help, Reed shrank himself and had Amy inject him into Johnny's body to join the fight. As the team battled the Psycho Woman internally, she sent another of her creations to attack Johnny and Amy externally. The Fantastic Four ultimately overcame the villain, and Johnny incinerated the final threat. With the danger past, they faced a painful decision. Amy keeping the child could put everyone at risk. Reed prepared to use the time platform to prevent the entire incident from ever occurring. But Amy, who had grown attached to the idea of motherhood, made her own choice. Without informing anyone, she claimed she wanted to go back and leapt into the portal herself, disappearing into the time stream. She never returned, leaving the team stunned and unsure of her fate, or that of Johnny's unborn child. Chapter 3. When everything's lost, the battle is won. After his journey to witness his own childhood birthday, Franklin Richards ascended the time stream and arrived in a barren, dimensionless void. With his mission complete, he had regained his reality-warping powers, which brought a visible sense of relief to both his sister Valeria and their grandfather, Nathaniel Richards. With the situation stabilized, Valeria departed again, heading back through time with a mission of her own, while Nathaniel excused himself to settle an old matter that had lingered for far too long. Left alone, Franklin used his restored abilities to sculpt a pocket dimension, lush and green, intended as a sanctuary for the future Foundation once their responsibilities were finally fulfilled. Back in the past, at State University, an ethics lecture was underway. Professor Brandt challenged his students with the question, "What defines moral action?" A young Reed Richards answered that it was whatever benefited all of humanity. Sitting nearby, Victor Von Doom countered sharply, insisting that true morality was about surpassing one's own limits. It was clear this debate between them was not new. It was a clash of ideals destined to shape their futures. Later that day, Reed returned to his dorm room, chatting casually with his roommate Ben Grimm about weekend plans. Their conversation was abruptly interrupted by a rupture in time. As Nathaniel Richards stepped through, Reed lit up with joy upon recognizing his father, quickly introducing him to Ben. Curious about his sudden arrival, they asked what brought him here. Nathaniel shared the tale. Years ago, he had left his family behind to undertake secret missions for the Brotherhood of the Shield. During one of these missions, he encountered a maniac wielding a quantum device. To disarm the mechanism, Nathaniel was flung far into Earth 616's distant future. He landed in a strange meadow, and the event altered him, granting him both superhuman longevity and the ability to navigate through time. But there was a consequence. The incident pulled countless alternate versions of Nathaniel into the same location, empowering all of them in the process. This disruption drew the wrath of Immortus, a temporal enforcer working for the Auditors and the Time Variance Authority. Immortus issued a cruel ultimatum. The Nathaniels must kill one another until only one survived, or face total extermination. Thus began the bloody conflict known as the Great Hunt. Nathaniel had spent years trying to escape the hunt, hiding in the alternate reality of Earth 6311. Now, only two Nathaniels remained, himself and one last rival. He had returned not to ask for help, but to bid his son farewell. He came to Reed's younger self, hoping to avoid involving the more powerful future version of his son. But Reed wasn't about to sit this out, and neither was Ben. They had someone else in mind who could help. With secret weapons developed in the shadows by none other than Victor Von Doom, the trio recruited the enigmatic genius to join their mission. Armed and united, the four men prepared to confront the final Nathaniel in a temporal war unlike any other. Elsewhere in the present-day Baxter Building, Valeria emerged from her temporal journey. Her sudden arrival triggered defensive measures, and the Invisible Woman attempted to capture her. But once Valeria revealed who she was, the tension eased. Mother and daughter sat down for tea and talked. Far in the future, Reed, Nathaniel, Ben and Victor arrived at their destination, the ruins of a once great time citadel known as collapsed Chronopolis. Victor observed the warped cityscape with both admiration and unease. The city, a marvel of temporal engineering, now stood as a shell of its former glory, haunting and decayed. They moved forward, heading toward the central tower where their last enemy awaited. There, at the heart of the fractured timeline, the final confrontation unfolded. The last Nathaniel stood ready, and at long last, the great hunt reached its conclusion. Chapter 4. Because of all these things I've done. In the ruins of collapsed Chronopolis, the long and bloody conflict known as the Great Hunt was finally drawing to a close. Immortus had once decreed that every incarnation of Nathaniel Richards must eliminate the others as punishment for tampering with the boundaries of time. Nathaniel had outlasted the others, not just through brutality, but by scavenging powerful tech and weapons from each fallen counterpart. But Earth, so 1/6's Nathaniel wasn't alone. He had brought reinforcements, his younger son, Reed Richards, and two of Reed's allies, Ben Grimm and Victor Von Doom. Together they breached the stronghold at the heart of Chronopolis. The tyrannical Nathaniel immediately summoned the Anachronauts, a deadly legion bound to his will, and chaos erupted as the clash began. The alternate Nathaniel nearly triumphed, striking down the heroes and preparing to end it once and for all. But Victor, using a mind control device of his own design, disrupted the villain's actions at a critical moment. The madman countered quickly, disabling the helmet and hammering Ben to the ground. Panicked and desperate, Reed took a weapon and blasted off the man's hand. Even faced with the chance to end his rival's reign, Nathaniel 616 couldn't bring himself to kill the last surviving version of himself. His twin, amused, mocked his hesitation. Unable to finish the deed, Nathaniel turned to Victor and handed him the mace. Victor, without a word, executed the rogue Nathaniel. With the threat ended, the younger men were safely returned to their time. Nathaniel lingered only long enough to tell Reed goodbye. Reed hoped they'd meet again. Nathaniel returned the hope, then vanished. Elsewhere in the present, Valeria Richards, now grown, sat with her mother Susan sipping tea. She revealed that Franklin had already visited the past, trying to warn his younger self. In Valeria's original timeline, a cataclysm called the Last War would have triggered a collapse of all possible futures into one timeline, inevitably leading to the universe's slow death. She and Franklin were trying to stop it, but the path ahead was unforgiving. She explained that they couldn't prevent everything. Some events were coming no matter what. The best they could do was meet them head-on and hope to endure. Franklin's intervention had already set things in motion, but if he simply let those changes unfold, they would consume him. Now, Valeria was continuing his work, though she admitted the risk. They both might die in the process. Susan accused her daughter of playing God, but Valeria made it clear this had always been Franklin's plan. At the distant edge of existence, Nathaniel, weary from his victory, arrived in the pocket dimension Franklin had crafted. Franklin greeted him coldly and suddenly tried to hurl him into a rift in reality. Nathaniel realized the timeline was shifting and that he had to escape before it rewrote him. Franklin was unbothered by the threat and offered no sympathy. When Nathaniel demanded to know why, Franklin gave him the real answer: Reed. Because of the Great Hunt, all versions of Nathaniel had been pulled into Earth 616, leaving every Reed Richards across the multiverse fatherless. That wound, growing up without a father, was Reed's deepest flaw. It was the reason the Council of Reeds collapsed. With a sharp kick to the face, Franklin shoved Nathaniel into the revision wave, forcing him to teleport out in defeat. Back in the present, Valeria prepared to return to the time stream. Before she left, she gave her mother a final piece of advice. There will be a moment where you'll feel like giving up. You'll want to let go. When that moment comes, look up at the sky. Remember the price that was paid. When Valeria re-entered the haven Franklin had built, she found it on the verge of collapse. The approaching timeline was reshaping reality, compressing their small refuge with overwhelming force. With no more time left, Franklin and Valeria leapt forward into the unknown, unsure if they'd even survive the landing. 3. Chapter 1. In Latveria, the flowers bloom in winter. While the Fantastic Four were busy dealing with a rebellion breaking out in the neutral zone surrounding the Forever City, Valeria Richards quietly made her way into her father's lab. Bypassing the sophisticated security systems with ease, she slipped into Reed Richards's private workspace, one he had kept off limits. There, she found something that caught her off guard: the bridge. Despite having assured her mother he would dismantle it, Reed had kept the device intact. As she examined its files, Valeria uncovered the truth about the interdimensional Council of Reeds. Concerned, she feared the fallout if her mother found out what Reed had been hiding. Far away in Latveria, Dr. Doom sat deep in thought. The recent trauma of having his mind hijacked by the intelligentsia still haunted him. Turning to his loyal servant Boris, Doom gave an order: summon Christoph Bernard, his adopted son, from exile. Doom no longer trusted the stability of his own mind, and planned to have Christoph rule in his place, at least temporarily. But before any such plan could unfold, Valeria Richards teleported into his throne room. She told him what she had discovered in her father's lab, and that she had come to seek his counsel, not as an enemy, but as Uncle Doom. Valeria then explained what she saw. She had activated the bridge and stepped into the realm where the interdimensional Council of Reeds operated. There, she witnessed them locked in battle with the terrifying Mad Celestials. During her escape, 4 Reeds from the Council guided her back through the portal to her own reality. Once back, the Reeds assessed her world briefly and vanished. Conflicted by what she had seen, Valeria admitted that she believed her father was making a mistake and sought Doom's opinion. Doom, humbled and aware of his own mental instability, replied that he might not be the right man to advise her that day. Still, Valeria insisted she needed him to help her father. Back in the future city, the Fantastic Four were facing another crisis. The evolutionary engine, a device of immense power, was expanding its effect radius. During the mission, Ben Grimm's face mask cracked, triggering his reversion to a primitive ape-like state under the engine's influence. Recognizing the urgency, Reed instructed Sue to shield the entire city in a force field, while Johnny ignited a massive nova flame, consuming all the oxygen and rendering the city's population unconscious. With the immediate threat neutralized, Reed was finally able to shut the machine down. When the Fantastic Four returned to the Baxter Building, they were greeted by their children. Reed asked Valeria if anything interesting had happened during their absence. She paused, recalling her final exchange with Doom. In their last moments together, Valeria had offered him something unexpected, a way to fix the damage in his brain. In return, she asked him to promise to help her father when the time came. Doom had agreed. Looking her father in the eyes, Valeria kept her secrets close. "Nothing I couldn't handle," she replied with a faint smile. Elsewhere, far beneath the Earth's surface, the Silver Surfer stood in stunned silence. Before him lay the lifeless body of Galactus, but from a distant future. The sight of his fallen master was unbearable, and the surfer stared at the cosmic remains with quiet devastation, unwilling to accept what he saw. Chapter 2. Congratulations, Mr. Grimm. You're handsome again. Back from the mission to the future city, Ben Grimm waited patiently, hoping the temporary mutation he'd undergone would reverse itself soon. Staring into the mirror, he sighed heavily. Still the same rocky form he'd come to know all too well. Disappointed, he made his way to the kitchen where Johnny Storm was prepping breakfast and chatting with the kids. Johnny mentioned that they were about to accompany Sue as she departed for Old Atlantis. Ben told him he needed a favor, something important. Elsewhere in the hangar, Sue Richards was saying her goodbyes. She hugged Franklin and Valeria tightly and reminded them to behave while she was gone. Turning to Reed, she said she didn't expect any trouble negotiating peace among the undersea nations. With that, her ship lifted off, bound for diplomatic duty. Meanwhile, Ben and Johnny made their way to the lab. Ben pulled out a small vial, the result of months of work from the Future Foundation. It was a serum designed to give him a full week in human form once a year. Ben was ready to try it and asked Johnny to stay close in case something went wrong. With a deep breath, he drank it. Within moments, his rock-like hide cracked and fell away, revealing his old human form beneath. Johnny quipped that Ben looked even worse now, drawing a startled look before Ben caught the joke. Johnny suggested they skip the emotional stuff and enjoy the day like two regular guys. They hit the streets of New York, unnoticed and uninterrupted. They caught a football game, grabbed dinner with some old friends, and later joined the New Avengers for a friendly poker night. On the walk back to their car, they encountered the latest version of the Yancey Street Gang, this time made up of ex-brokers and failed tech entrepreneurs. The gang tried to mug them, but Ben and Johnny were more than ready to brawl and left them sprawled across the sidewalk. While this unfolded, Sue arrived on Utopia Isle in the Pacific, where Cyclops and Emma Frost greeted her warmly. After exchanging pleasantries, she was escorted to Namor, who awaited the old Atlantean delegates. Namor spoke with calm authority, expressing his hopes for a new alliance between the submerged kingdoms. Back in New York, Ben and Johnny, fresh from their street fight, weren't quite ready to call it a night. Johnny told Ben there was one last stop they needed to make, but kept the destination secret. They soon pulled up outside Alicia Masters' building. Johnny gave Ben a nudge, urging him to go up. Though hesitant at first, Ben agreed. Alicia opened the door and was stunned to see him in his human form. Overcome with emotion, she embraced him, tears in her eyes. From the street, Johnny watched the moment unfold through the window, smiling, proud that his friend had finally allowed himself this long overdue happiness. As dawn approached, high above the city, Reed Richards was alone in the observatory, peering into the universe through a high-powered telescope. He was studying the anomaly known as the Fault when a sudden burst of cosmic energy filled the room. The Silver Surfer appeared, demanding an explanation. He had discovered a dead Galactus buried beneath the Earth, one that had originated from the future. He made it clear that Galactus himself now wanted answers. Almost on cue, the sky above the Baxter Building shimmered with immense power as the Devourer of Worlds descended. Galactus had arrived. Chapter 3. The King of Atlantis. Johnny and Ben were heading back home after a long night out when they looked up and saw something that stopped them cold. Galactus was looming silently over the Baxter Building. Knowing his current human form would make him less effective in a confrontation, Ben told Johnny to go on ahead while he caught up. Up on the rooftop, Galactus was already confronting Reed Richards. He had come with a single burning question. Why was there a corpse, his own, from the future, buried beneath the Earth? Reed calmly explained. The body had indeed come from a doomed future and had been repurposed as a massive energy source used to transport that future's entire population into the present. They were now living on New Earth, trying to begin again. When Johnny arrived, Galactus clarified that he posed no threat to Earth. He simply wanted to know where New World was so he could find more answers about how and why he died in that timeline. Galactus insisted Reed accompany him. Reed agreed, telling Johnny he'd be needed to keep things grounded while he was gone. Before departing, Johnny told Reed that Ben's transformation serum had worked. Reed was glad to hear it. As Galactus prepared to leave, Reed reassured Johnny, promising he'd return soon. Beneath the ocean, Susan Storm was deep in diplomatic work, assisting Andromeda with the delicate process of negotiating a peace accord between old and new Atlantis. Namor soon arrived and requested a private conversation with Sue. Though Andromeda hesitated, she yielded. In private, Namor revealed that Andromeda had concerns. She believed the treaty might not truly serve the best interests of his kingdom. Elsewhere, Galactus transported Reed to his immense world ship, Tar 2. As they prepared to set course for New World, Galactus gave Reed a quiet warning. Franklin's powers had begun to reactivate. Back at the Baxter Building, Johnny and Ben took a break from heroics to entertain the Future Foundation kids with a wild retelling of one of their earlier missions. As the story unfolded, Ben subtly wove in a valuable lesson for the young minds. Even the smartest people can't plan for everything. When the tale wrapped up, they sent the kids off to bed, then talked about quieter things: family, future, maybe even settling down. Meanwhile, in a darkened corner of the city, a sinister gathering was underway. A figure known only as the anti-priest preached nihilism to his devoted followers, encouraging them to spread chaos. After the sermon, he slipped into a hidden room and shed his human guise, revealing a twisted insectoid form. A transmission from his master, Annihilus, crackled through. The anti-priest assured him that by the next day, they would breach the Baxter Building and force open the portal to the negative zone, unleashing the annihilation wave once more. Far away beneath the Gulf of Thailand, another storm was brewing. At an underwater diplomatic site, representatives from old and new Atlantis had gathered. Tensions rose quickly when Ul-Uhar, the old ruler, mocked Namor for offering no sacrifices to legitimize the talks. Without warning, Namor rose and delivered a chilling response. There would be only one true king of the sea. With swift brutality, he struck down Ul-Uhar, leaving the rest of the delegation in stunned silence. Chapter 4, World Eater. Namor had just struck down Ul-Uhar, ruler of old Atlantis, right in the middle of peace talks. The representatives of the Uhari, Kor-Dai, and Mala tribes bristled, ready to retaliate. Sue Storm quickly stepped in, commanding the soldiers to stand down before things spiraled into full-blown war. But then a thought clicked. This entire negotiation had been a setup, orchestrated by Namor himself. Her suspicions were confirmed almost instantly as Atlantean warships launched a sudden assault on the facility. Not wanting things to escalate further, Sue threw up a massive force field, shielding everyone inside from the incoming attack. Far from Earth, aboard the immense vessel Tar-2, Galactus continued his course toward New World. The Silver Surfer returned, bringing with him Ted Castle and what appeared to be Alyssa Moy. But Reed quickly discovered that it wasn't Alyssa at all. It was a robotic replica Ted had created. Curious about Galactus' intentions, Ted asked what the purpose of this journey was. Reed admitted he didn't fully know what Galactus was seeking. 14 hours later, they reached their destination, New World. What they found was alarming. The planet was being pulled slowly but inevitably into a black hole. Back on Earth, the anti-priest addressed his congregation, instructing them to ready themselves for their master's arrival. Without warning, several of his followers teleported directly into the Baxter Building. Ben and Johnny were caught completely off guard. Johnny quickly rallied, telling Ben their first priority was protecting the children. Elsewhere inside, the Malloyd kids were already under attack by more of the anti-priest's servants, who shed their human disguises to reveal insectoid forms beneath. Alex Power jumped into action, using his mass-shifting ability to crush the attackers. When Ben and Johnny regrouped with the kids, they recognized the creatures immediately. They were from the negative zone, but things were about to get worse. Each fallen creature had egg sacs embedded in their bodies, and they were about to hatch. Johnny asked where the others were, and Alex pointed them toward Reed's lab. Above New World, Galactus pressed Reed once again. How had an entire civilization from the future ended up here? Reed explained that roughly 500 years from now, Earth's sun began to collapse, plunging the planet into a deep freeze. To survive, humanity fled the dying world and traveled into the past, settling on New World to rebuild. Galactus then asked if the catastrophe could be avoided altogether. That question sparked a memory in Reed, how he and the Council of Reeds once stabilized stars and created food planets to sustain life. He proposed that they could apply the same logic to prevent that future from ever occurring. Galactus listened, then calmly declared that to survive, he must consume New World. Reed and Ted immediately objected, but Galactus reminded them they lacked the means to stop him. Faced with no alternative, Reed, Ted, and the robot Moy descended to the surface to organize a last-minute evacuation. Back under the ocean, Sue continued to maintain her protective barrier. But progress in the talks had stalled. Namor requested a private moment with her once again. In this tense conversation, he explained his actions. Ul-Uhar Uluhar's people, along with the other tribes, were infamous for destroying what they couldn't conquer. They had been exiled to the South Pole centuries ago after losing a war with Atlantis. Namor then revealed the chilling truth behind their diplomatic games. They were enacting something called Ul-Ulgar. This ritual involved using a third party to interact with outsiders, only to lure them in for destruction. In this case, Sue was the intermediary, which meant they planned to eliminate her next. Meanwhile, inside the Baxter Building, chaos continued. Johnny, Ben, and Alex reached the rest of the Future Foundation, who were struggling to hold the invaders at bay. Valeria had been busy. She handed Ben a specialized weapon she had engineered, accounting for his current human state. As they fought side by side, she briefed them. The portal to the negative zone was vulnerable from their end because all Earth's vibranium had been rendered inert, leaving their defenses compromised. Before they could react, a horrific sound echoed through the building. The insectoids had gnawed through the door, and now the full force of the invasion from the negative zone had access to Earth. Chapter 5. The Last Stand. The Fantastic Four found themselves scattered across the globe and beyond, each tackling a crisis that could spiral into catastrophe. Deep beneath the sea, Susan Storm was caught in a volatile negotiation between New and Old Atlantis, trying to prevent the talks from dissolving into war. Light years away, on New World, Reed Richards worked feverishly with Ted Castle and Moy 2515 to organize an evacuation before Galactus consumed the planet entirely. Back in New York, the Baxter Building had become a battlefield, as Johnny Storm, Ben Grimm, and the Future Foundation children fought to prevent an annihilation wave from pouring through a breach to the negative zone in Reed's lab. The situation in the lab quickly spiraled as more invaders flooded through. Knowing they needed more power on their side, Valeria made a hard choice. She knocked Leech unconscious, disabling the suppression of Franklin's abilities. Recharged with his full cosmic potential, Franklin wiped out the wave of insectoid attackers with ease, while the team raised a force field around the portal to hold off the next onslaught. With the immediate danger contained, Ben managed to get a call through to the Avengers, but Valeria warned them the barrier wasn't meant to hold out a full-scale invasion. The only permanent solution was to shut the gate from the other side. It became clear they would have to let the Future Foundation kids join the fight. Meanwhile, in the underwater chambers beneath the Gulf of Thailand, Sue demanded answers. She challenged the leaders of Old Atlantis to respond to Namor's accusation that this summit was a setup to assassinate him and seize his throne. The elders insisted their exile had changed them. What once was a sacrificial tradition, the Ul-Oit, had evolved into a form of transitional rule until heirs could ascend. With Uluhar gone and his children under the Future Foundation's care, they proclaimed Susan the new monarch of Old Atlantis. She accepted the role, realizing her influence could broker true peace. On New World, Reed and his team learned the unsettling truth. The entire population's consciousness had been absorbed into Natalie X's collective hive mind. When they spoke to Lightwave about the evacuation, he grimly revealed Galactus wasn't just going to drain the planet, he intended to erase it completely. Back at the portal, Johnny, Ben, and Franklin charged into the negative zone, battling to push the invasion force back and regain control of the breach. As they cleared the immediate threat, Valeria worked furiously on the terminal, searching for a way to permanently seal the gate. But she hit a wall. Someone would have to remain inside the negative zone to activate the failsafe. There was no way around it. Under the sea, Susan embraced her new authority. She turned to Namor and told him to accept the offer from Old Atlantis. When he reached for her arm in protest, she spun, threw him back with a blast, and warned him next time she wouldn't ask. Namor, stunned, nodded in admiration. On New World, Reed Castle and Moy 2515 completed work on the return portal. Just as they were ready to depart, they encountered Hulk Jr., now going by the name Maestro. At first resistant, he listened to their account of what was happening and ultimately agreed to accompany them back. Inside the negative zone, Ben insisted he would stay behind to seal the door while Johnny got the kids to safety. But when the Horde charged again, Johnny shoved Ben through the portal, slammed the switch, and activated the containment field. On the other side, Ben pounded helplessly on the barrier, shouting for Johnny to let him back in. As he did, the effects of his serum faded, and he reverted to the Thing once more. Within the breach, Annihilus led the final wave. Johnny turned to face him. "Goodbye, Ben," he said softly. igniting into full flame. Then he flew straight into the enemy's ranks, knowing full well he wasn't coming back. On the safe side of the portal, Franklin and the Thing stood in silence, tears streaming down their faces as they mourned the loss of Johnny Storm. The end is just the beginning. Epilogue, month of mourning. Hearing the news of Johnny's demise, all the heroes, the Avengers and X-Men rushed into the Baxter Building. There they found Ben sitting solemnly, hugging the Malloyd kids. Valeria turned and looked at the heroes with sad eyes. The heroes stood stunned. They knelt down beside Ben as he looked at them with hurtful eyes. Hawkeye looked to the other side. Sue had arrived. Hearing the news, she broke down. Franklin held her tight. It was the first day of mourning. Sue sat alone and grieved, not talking to anyone. As Reed went to her and reached for her, she formed a force bubble around herself. She didn't want to be disturbed. It was day 3. On the 4th day, Reed took out the ultimate nullifier and opened the portal to the negative zone. As he started the annihilation, a young Annihilus stood in front of him. He showed Reed Johnny's tattered costume. Reed was overcome with rage and grief. He screamed but then pulled himself back. After that, he deactivated the portal. All the heroes gathered at Johnny's memorial. Teary-eyed, they shared their condolences. Only Ben sat in a corner, red-eyed and full of rage. On day 6, Christophe Bernard ascended to the throne of Latveria. As he walked past his followers, Doom looked from above. On day 8, Doom traveled to Johnny's grave. There, everyone stood and paid their regards. On day 14, Franklin sat alone on the rooftop of the Baxter Building. Spider-Man spotted him and descended to his side for a talk. On day 20, Valeria Richards stood in front of the Future Foundation class, writing down names of possible replacements for Johnny Storm. None of the names fit. Valeria wiped them all out and wrote in big, bold, capital letters, "Kill Annihilus," as the class stared at her with burning eyes. On day 26, Ben flew in to meet Bruce Banner and Donald Blake in a desert. Bruce showed Ben a hologram of the funeral statue for Johnny. Ben lashed out in anger and turned to leave. Blake transformed into Thor and tried to talk to Ben, but Ben punched him back. Banner changed into Hulk and hit Ben. Ben picked up his fantastic cycle and smashed it on Hulk. It blasted into pieces. Thor screamed to bring down the thunder, but Hulk stopped him. He stood in front of Ben while Ben kept landing punches on him. Hulk stood there and took the punches like a rock until Ben became tired. Broken, Ben fell on his knees, but Hulk caught him. Thor approached him and hugged him as well. The 3 friends grieved their fallen comrade. On day 29th, Reed sat tired and sad in front of a console. His eyes were fixated on a task list which listed out the imminent dangers: invasions from the bridge, the negative zone, and the Inhumans, and an attack from Galactus. There was also a concern about Franklin's power set and the regrouping of the Council of Reeds, but Reed was too tired to move. He kept looking with red eyes when suddenly the negative zone portal burst open. Nathaniel Richards from Earth 616 had arrived, and Reed could only watch in bewilderment. Uncles. On day 14, Franklin sat quietly on the edge of the Baxter Building rooftop. He looked down, lost in thought, as birds flew past the skyline. Spider-Man arrived, swinging through the city, and quietly landed behind him. Franklin glanced back and softly said, "Hey." Spider-Man gently greeted him and asked how long he had been up there. Franklin replied, "A while, it's quiet." Spider-Man asked if he could stay with him for a bit. Franklin said, "Sure," then added, "I guess not," as they sat together in silence. Franklin broke the silence, saying, "Uncle Johnny died." Spider-Man nodded and said he knew, expressing how sorry he was. He asked Franklin how he was doing. Franklin admitted he wasn't doing well. He couldn't sleep and kept having bad thoughts. Spider-Man understood and offered, "What do you say we clear our heads?" As they swung through the city together, Spider-Man asked if Franklin had eaten lunch. Franklin wasn't really hungry, but Spider-Man said he was starving for a hot dog and wouldn't eat unless Franklin did too. Franklin agreed. At the hot dog stand, Spider-Man asked to borrow $1. Sitting above the city, he told Franklin that he understood how he felt. He shared that he too lost someone, his Uncle Ben, when he was younger. They had been very close, like Franklin and Johnny. Franklin asked what happened, and Spider-Man replied, "He was killed in a robbery." Franklin softly said, "I'm sorry." Spider-Man said he was too. He explained that though he still missed his uncle, the dark thoughts eventually fade and get replaced with happy memories. Franklin asked how long it takes. Spider-Man answered, "It takes a while," and handed him a napkin, pointing out he had ketchup on his face. Franklin thanked him. Then Franklin quietly asked, "Can I tell you a secret, Spider-Man?" Spider-Man Spider-Man said, "Of course." Franklin confessed, "I think I could have stopped Uncle Johnny from dying." And the Spider-Man promised to keep it secret and admitted, "I know I could have stopped my uncle from dying." When Franklin asked why he didn't, Spider-Man said it was because he was young and didn't realize how important every decision was. He said, "People with gifts like theirs must think about helping others, not just themselves." That's what his Uncle Ben wanted, and what Johnny would want too. Franklin nodded. As they prepared to leave, Franklin asked Spider-Man what his uncle's name was. Spider-Man answered his name was Ben. Marvelous verdict. As you all can imagine, Johnny Storm's sacrifice isn't the end. It is the spark that lit the way for a bold new era, the birth of the Future Foundation. But can Reed Richards guide a generation of young minds into becoming something greater than even the Fantastic Four? Can they rise above loss and build a world worth saving? Well, you won't have to wait long, because the Long Red's crew is diving head first into the entire Future Foundation saga in our very next video. So stick around, and remember, when the world breaks apart, Marvelous Long Reds puts it back together, one epic at a time.